Hello, hello! We're back with streaming. I know I was gone last week. We're gonna continue Dead Man's Rest. I think we have 2 routes left, and then we should be good with this game. So that's exciting. Let's just get started. That night started just like any other. My butt was sitting on a rattler on my way to some 2-bit town in the back end of nowhere. Golders Rock they called it, though I never heard of no gold there. Never heard of it at all until 2 days ago. Do we want to see my mouse cursor? Is that annoying? I can't remember. There we go. The enter key works. I got a tip from one of my associates that a wanted criminal by the name of Wild Bill McCoy was hiding out there. See, I'm a bounty hunter by trade. I prefer living the drifter's life. Just me and my revolver. You know, I don't think we've ever used our gun in any of the other routes in this game. Easier that way. You ain't got nothing to lose but your life. It ain't been long since old McCoy and I had a run-in last time. This one's a bit personal. I've wanted to see McCoy dead for a long time. Everyone around here knows he's my target, and they ain't to interfere unless they want a bullet in their face. We're not that intimidating, I gotta say. He got away once, and he ain't doing it twice. Back at it again. Something else was going on that night, though, while I was on that dusty train. See, there had been some sort of trouble there. The highfalutin mayor, you see, didn't have too many friends. Seems someone was out to get him. The saloon was full, buckaroos playing cards, cheating cards, and drinking all night long. The mayor was at the bar. He'd been on the red eye since dusk, and at midnight he tipped his hat and left the saloon all roostered. Hey Jed, have a good night. Last words. Famous last words. Bad move for a man with enemies. Guys watched him go, tottering around. Something bad was bound to happen. Seems he made it home, though, just about the time I drifted into town. First place I went was the saloon, a dirty, crumbling old joint by the name of Dead Man's Rest. Full of guys, the mayor had only just left 5 minutes before I arrived. No man paid me attention except the barkeep, but that was fine with me. I was dragged out. Got myself diggings there for just a few Lincoln skins and settled in. Words have meaning. Figured I'd rest for the night and set out at sunrise to settle the score with Wild Bill. Ain't no way I could have foresaw what would happen that night, or the kind of men I was about to meet. Prologue. Oh no! Oh no! We've seen it before. We've seen it, 3 times already? Lee McCarthy, that's us. Jed Matlock, that was the route we just finished last time. Taza was the first one we did. Hollis Dalton, the second one. John Cartwright will be our target this time. Though, I don't know how that's gonna go, because I literally cannot picture anything between the two. Music's quiet, but that's okay. That's all good. My brother in arms. I got up the next morning thinking nothing was amiss. Packed up my plunder and headed down to the bar, intending to be out of town and over to Wild Bill's hideout by noon. I think in Jed's route, we were like here for like months, or at least 1 month. The barkeep stopped me as I was heading out the door. He was a tall man with long blonde hair and a kind-looking face. Hey stranger, you hear about what happened last night? Didn't hear nothing. Mayor Dalton's gone and been done. Found dead as a doornail first thing. Sheriff's rounding up a bunch of guys for questioning. Old Dalton didn't have a lot of friends. This wasn't good news. It ain't never good news when a shooting happens in the town you're in. Too much attention. And even worse, I was an outsider. For all they knew, I could have been hired to do it. The barkeep was looking at me like he thought I might have been hiding something. I kept his gaze. Sounds like some bad business is going on around here. You could call it that. Best watch your back though, stranger. It seems the streets ain't safe. Especially if they think you did it. You think I did it? He looked at me for a long time. Nah, don't reckon you did. Good. You're clearly a discerning man. I see what I see, and what I see is a stranger who ain't got nothing to do with it. I got my own theories, though. Good to have theories. I ain't involved, though, and want to stay that way. Maybe I'll see you around. Sure. I left the saloon and stepped out into the street. It seemed like news spread fast in this little town. People were all over, whispering and pointing. I spat on the ground. Patooey! Looked like I was gonna have to make a statement, show these guys I weren't no killer. At least, not outside of the law. Before I could do anything, though, I heard another voice behind me. Oi, stranger. I want a word with you. That's two different men, like... I turned around to see the sheriff standing square and looking me in the eyes. He had a groomed mustache and slick hair, looking like he took good care of himself. What for? Acknowledge the corn, stranger. I think you know what's going on. I reckon. Ain't nothing going on as far as I'm concerned, except my job. And what's that? Bringing criminals to justice, same as you. I took out the crumpled wanted poster and my bounty hunter's badge from my bag and showed him. Wild Bill McCoy ain't gonna turn himself over, so can I get on my way? He looked over my stuff, then back up at me. He didn't want to let me go easy, especially since folk were watching. Yeah, that'd be embarrassing for him. I don't trust you, stranger. You're high on the list for who might have committed this crime, and ain't no way I'm letting you skip town. You try to leave, I'll put a bullet in your back. He gave me back my papers and badge, and I put them into my bag. Sounds mighty impressive, but I know you can't shoot no innocent man, Sheriff. You can't prove nothing on me, so your hands are tied. He's gonna be like, oh yeah, watch this. Bam! We glared at each other for a minute. He knew he couldn't keep me there. Thing is, the longer he was suspecting me, the less time he was spending looking for the real killer. The longer it took to find the real killer, the longer he'd suspect me. For that whole time, the harder it'd be to find and kill Bill. I sighed. You want my help, Sheriff? I ain't bad at finding stuff out, and I want justice, same as you. The sheriff didn't look too pleased at that. Keep your nose out and let me do my job, greenhorn. You don't know anything about these parts. I sized him up. Square up, buddy. No. But I know a lot about the kind of men I meet. Men are the same everywhere, you see, Sheriff. He narrowed his eyes. He knew what I was implying, what I was accusing him of. He spat at my feet. I'm handling this investigation, so don't get in my way. And don't leave town. He turned away, spurs clicking, and sauntered off back to the station. Seemed I wasn't going anywhere, so I wheeled round and went back into the saloon. Bill would have to wait. Looked like I had a new job on my hands. The barkeep was washing up when I went back in. He gave me a hard look but didn't say nothing. I sat down at a table and turned my badge over in my hands. I needed to figure a way out of this before it got ugly. At that point, I overheard two guys sitting one table over. Yeah, old Hollis. Heard he went to speak to Dalton the other day. Thought them two never spoke. Thought they hated each other. They did, but Hollis was completely soaked the other night and kept going on about family ties and all that bull. Could be there's something fishy there. Shh, not so loud when you're accusing folk. Anyone in this rumhole could hear us. I already did. They shot me a glance and I looked down at my badge again. That sure was interesting. Some estranged family member who could be involved in this. I thought perhaps that'd be a good place to start investigating. Save. Oh yeah, since I guess there's no cloud save on this computer, or not computer, on this game, so when I switched my PC over, it didn't, all my other completed routes and options were not carried over, so on the other hand, these leaky mouths probably have no idea. I'd have to rely on more than just gossip to work this mess out. Seems Lady Luck was on my side. Before too long, the barkeep came round to my table. At least I think the sheriff is a route. Why else would he be in the credits? The opening credits? I don't know. Howdy, stranger. Can I get you something? Howdy. Nah, I'm good. His eyes shone with curiosity. Seems he likes to know who's coming in and out of his saloon. I gestured at a chair by the table. Want a seat? Don't mind if I do. He pulled out the chair and sat down. For a moment, he didn't say nothing. He had an easygoing manner about him, made a man feel calm. I found myself admiring his hair. It looked sleek, like he took good care of it. Too quickly, I had to derail that train of thought. We thought the sheriff was well-groomed, we think Jed's well-groomed. Do we just not shower? Like... and weren't gonna lead to anywhere good. Before long, he spoke up. So, what brings you to town? You said last night you were just passing through. Yeah, then that happened. I thumbed over my shoulder toward the street. Sheriff Cartwright says, on account of the murder, I ain't to leave town. The barkeep sighed. Yeah, he gets all wound up sometimes, and ain't nothing changes his mind. For what it's worth, stranger, like I told you before, I don't think you done it. No? Nah. Nah. Dalton had a lot of enemies, people lining up to make sure he had an accident. You weren't one of them, so what do you care? Killing him only puts fat on the fire for you. At least, if what you're saying about not staying in town is true. I like this guy. He was real easy to be around. Pretty useful skill for a barkeep, and dangerous to stay near him too long. More dangerous for me than most. Sitting here with him, it made me feel more comfortable than I should have been. The name's Lee. Lee McCarthy. I held out my hand, and he gave it a firm shake. I've heard of you. Blackjack, right? The bounty hunter? The very same. I'm Jedediah Matlock. Everyone calls me Jed. It's nice to formally meet ya. Pleasure's mine. He let go of my hand with a smile. Boy, was I in trouble with this one. Jeez. So you must be on the lookout for Wild Bill then. I'm surprised he caught on like that. Had I been making it obvious? How'd you know? He shrugged. Man hears things around here. Yeah, we were just having a conversation with the sheriff right outside the bar. Some gang of ruffians turns up a month past, causing trouble. They tried a major heist at the bank last week, so they gotta be organized by someone pretty dangerous. Then the famous Blackjack shows up out of nowhere, and everyone knows Blackjack has his eyes set on Bill. Are we famous? I think Jed's the only one who's recognized us. Ever. In this town, at least. Ain't hard to piece it all together. I was impressed by him. He had a smart head on his shoulders, not what you expect from your average barkeep. It also meant I had to be careful what I said around him until I knew where his loyalties lay. Couldn't be too careful. Word gets around fast in a town like this. You're pretty sharp, Jed. Was it me, or was he blushing a little at that? Nah, just get used to hearing things is all, being a barkeep. Folks say a lot more than they ought to when they've been on the Who Hit John. Been running this joint for 3 years now, and they don't ever change. Long time. You from around here then? Nah, I'm from further out west. Just ended up here one day and saw the opportunity. I didn't ask how someone like him ended up in the butt end of nowhere. Usually, they weren't good stories. Seems like you made a success of it. He appeared to appreciate me not asking any further after his past. Oh, but we know. Yeah, it ain't a bad life. I can totally read and enunciate. He looked me square over and then seemed to come to a decision. He leaned in conspiratorially. I followed suit, sensing he was going to say something important. I had to concentrate hard on what he was saying, instead of on his eyes. Oh my god, McCarthy is down bad for this man. They were like the color of a summer sky in Arizona. Say, if you're really after Bill, I can help you. I like you. It'd be good for all of us if Bill was out of the way. I got a condition, though. With his face so close to mine, I felt like I'd give this man anything he wanted. What's that? You gotta come back by tonight. I don't want to see you up the spout because you didn't obey the sheriff. And I don't want him coming to me asking where you got your information. It'll get a lot more difficult for us both. Can you promise that? I locked eyes with him. This man seemed honest, and I wanted to do right by him. He knew what he was asking of me. To stay here, even though he was going to give me the means to get out. He was putting his trust in me. I wasn't sure I deserved it, but by gum, I was going to try my dangest to show it weren't misplaced. Sure, I'll be back. Count on it. I spit in my palm and offered it to him, and he did the same. A gentleman's oath. Alright then, I heard Bill's camped up by the old farmhouse northeast of the river. It's about half a day's journey from here on foot. Follow the path out of town past the station, then head east until you hit the riverbank. I'll take you straight up towards it. He leaned back again, looking around as two new guys entered the saloon. Gotta go. You better be back by sundown. I nodded to him as he headed back to the bar. I had the information I'd come for. I knew where to find Bill, and right now, there was nobody watching me. Now the question was, what should I do? What shall we do? Save. I think we're gonna ask permission from the sheriff. I figured if I went to the sheriff with the actual location of Bill's camp, he might be more willing to lend me an ear. For one thing, I was helping him out, taking a problem off his shoulders. And for another, he'd know where to find me if everything went bottom side up with the investigation and folks started asking. I can understand him wanting to keep me in town to uphold his reputation and all, but at some point, a man has to draw a line and say, this ain't right. Sneaking out weren't the way to do it though. It's only right to be upfront with him and ask him fair and square to his face. That's the way a respectable man does it. I could get the measure of what kind of man he really was, and he wouldn't have any reason not to trust me. I headed out, tipping my hat to Jed. Yeehaw. Sun was shining down on another baking hot day. Dust was up in the air, getting in my eyes. I put my head down and made my way to the sheriff's office. It weren't far from the saloon, Golders Rock being a small town. When I got there, I noticed 2 mudsills in the cells. Sheriff weren't nowhere to be seen, though. Perhaps he was out. The prisoners weren't paying me no mind, so I sat down to wait. Sliding on in. It weren't long before Cartwright came slamming into the joint, arms in the air and clearly mad about summit. His hair was still perfect when he pulled his hat off. I wondered how he did that. Wig. He caught sight of me while walking in, and I could see him getting madder by the second. Then he turned to me and sighed, pitching the bridge of his nose. What do you want, McCarthy? I got real problems I'm dealing with here. I took off my hat before responding, figuring being polite would help my case. More flies with honey and all that. Just a minute of your time, Sheriff, if you'd oblige. I eyed the prisoners behind me as I spoke, and Cartwright seemed to catch my drift. He glared at me, then grudgingly led the way into his office. Once we got in, he sat down wearily and threw his hat on the rack, putting his feet up on the desk. Spill it, McCarthy. What's going on? Someone said something to you? It ain't like that, Sheriff. I want to ask your permission to leave. He sighed. And I already told you, you ain't going nowhere until this case is done with. Do you not speak English? Can I make it any plainer? I tried to keep my cool. Getting angry wouldn't make this any easier. I found out where Bill's camped. I can give you the location of where I'll be, and if you have any problems with folk or you want me for questioning, you know where to come find me. I've shown you my credentials already. You know I'm speaking sense. And if I take out Bill, I'm saving you some work. The sheriff closed his eyes, then took his feet off the desk. Look, McCarthy. You don't seem to get the poop I'm dealing with here. Folk look to me to make sure this case is getting solved, and if they don't see me investigating the right people, there's gonna be problems. I'm accountable to them. I'll be straight with you. I don't think you've done it. But if they do think so, I gotta be seen doing everything according to Hoyle. You get me? I understood plain. I was just hoping I could get him to look the other way. It seems Cartwright was a straight man, though. At least, he weren't suspecting me of nothing. What changed? You seemed to think I was suspicious earlier. Cartwright pulled up a file from his desk. I checked out your records with the federal government. You're clean. That's pretty quick. No connections to Dalton, no prior visits to this part of the country, no strange bank accounts. A few petty crimes here and there, but nothing to write home about. You are who you say you are. A bounty hunter here to get Wild Bill. Killing the mayor is more trouble for you than it's worth, so what'd be the motive? He threw the file on the desk and looked out the window. I can admit when I'm wrong, McCarthy, and I was wrong about you. I just can't let you go yet. Not until this whole mess is sorted out. 'Cause them out there don't know what to believe. I was frustrated, but at least he'd had the decency to explain it. So what am I gonna do now? I can't go get Bill. I can't leave town. How long do you expect this investigation to take? Cartwright pulled his head in his hands. It'll take as long as it takes, McCarthy. If it's a job you want, you'll find plenty of work around here for an honest man. That should help keep you until we find out who did this. Save. Remember what I said to you this morning about helping out? I was serious. I'm Circe. I'll be straight with you, Sheriff. I offered you this morning, and I'll do it again. If you want my help, or if you want help, then I'll help you. It's in my interest to see the culprit found too. Cartwright looked up at me suspiciously. He was quite handsome when he wasn't looking all serious. Still not a hair out of place. Well, I suppose you're already working with the law, albeit in a roundabout kind of way. I can't say I care for bounty hunters, but there's something different about you. If you think you can help me, or if you think you can help, then feel free. I'll give you the authority to question folk. I doubt you'll be able to turn up much that I haven't, though. This one's a tough nut to crack. Whoever done it cleaned up behind themselves well. Well, I'll do what I can. You can rely on me. Cartwright looked me up and down, appraising me. I'll see you tomorrow, McCarthy. Hope you have something for me by then, or Lord knows where I'm gonna find leads. Bro, do your job. What do you mean, Lord knows? I nodded and bowed my way out of his office. Working for the sheriff was a far sight from where I saw myself after this morning's altercation. Still, Cartwright seemed like a decent man, if a little heavy-handed. Perhaps I'll be able to do some good this way. And more importantly, finding out who did this to Dalton is my ticket out of town. I arrived back at the saloon and saluted Jed with 2 fingers before heading upstairs. I was gonna need a rest and work out who in town I needed to speak to. Next morning, I woke real early. Rubbing my eyes, I squinted out the window and saw the sun was only just about to rise. What the heck time do you call this, McCarthy? I grumbled to myself and tried to get back to sleep. My body weren't having none of it though, no matter what I tried. I sighed and got up, tossing my hair in frustration. That was when I saw it. A note lying on the floor, presumably scooted under the door in the night. Curious, I went to pick it up. Maybe it was orders from the sheriff he'd asked Jet to give to me. When I opened it though and read what was on the page, I went numb. Keep your nose out of our town's business, outsider, unless you want it cut off. Yeah, we know who wrote this. It was scrawled quick and uneven, like someone written it real fast, or like they were trying to disguise their handwriting. I pocketed it straight away. This was something the sheriff definitely had to see. Maybe he could figure out who'd wrote it, or how they managed to slip it under my door. Oh, we know. I went downstairs, careful not to make too much noise. Didn't need to worry though. It was quiet. Jed weren't up yet by the looks. I wondered if the sheriff would even be awake. It was early after all, and though he'd struck me as the type of man who took his job seriously, I didn't know how far that went. Well, it weren't like I had much else to do, and I didn't want to stick around the saloon. So I headed out towards the station. While I was walking, I considered my options. The way I saw it, the mayor's murder boiled down to 2 main suspects, Hollis and Wild Bill. Hollis had something to gain from it. Inheriting Dalton's estate and getting his estranged brother out of the way in one fell swoop, that was one heck of a motive. On the other hand, it was too easy to get caught, too obvious. The other clear lead was Wild Bill himself. His goons had been causing trouble around town already, and killing the mayor could have been part of some plan to sow chaos. He would have easily had the means. He's got a ton of lackeys lined up ready to do his bidding. Still, it weren't Bill's usual style. I'd know, being the guy that chased him for so long. He didn't like to make anything too obvious, too grandiose. I didn't have no other ideas though. Cartwright sure as heck wasn't gonna let me go out and speak to Bill, and I have a feeling if I went, he wouldn't live long enough to confess neither. So Hollis was my only option. That was where I'd start, after I've shown the sheriff this note. As I approached the station, I saw Cartwright just arriving. Sheriff! Morning, Sheriff. He jumped and turned to face me with his hand on his belt. When he saw it was me, he relaxed and rolled his eyes, letting out a long breath. Lord, McCarthy, you're gonna give a man a palpitation! The heck you doing here so early? I figured I'd tease him a little. It was easy to rile him up and pretty fun to see him getting all tightly wound. Is it? This is our like first encounter and he was like about to shoot us. I've been waiting for you, Sheriff. Wanted to get on the job. Get a good head start. Figured you'd be here, but it seems you've overslept this morning, huh? Get your head out of your butt, McCarthy. I ain't in the mood. Oh, listen up. He ain't in the mood. He unlocked the door, and I followed him in. We walked past the prisoners who were still sleeping and went straight into his office. What are you following me for? Get the heck out there and make yourself useful. Get me some information. Though he raised his voice, I could tell he weren't real angry. I thought you might like to see this, Sheriff. I pulled out the note from my pocket and threw it down on his desk. He glared at me, then picked it up and scanned it quick. He's gonna think I wrote this. What in tarnation? He looked back up at me, sharp brown eyes calculating. McCarthy, where'd you get this? Found it on the floor of my room this morning. They weren't there last night, so someone must have slipped it in my room. Jed? We exchanged glances. Jed wasn't the first to come to mind. Surely not. It'd be giving himself away. What most likely happened is someone gave it to Jed and asked him to pass it on to me, and he did it without looking. The sheriff nodded slowly. Yeah, that sounds more like Jed. So we gotta find out who gave it to him then. There you go. There's a lead for you already. I sat down opposite the sheriff and shook my head. That was far too easy. Seems like he won't go nowhere though. Why would a murderer give himself away by leaving such an easy trail? I'm gonna follow up on my original plan. The sheriff regarded me for a while, then sighed. His entire demeanor was of a man who was tired and irritated. Fine, do what you want. But I'm giving you one order, and you better follow it. You're moving out of the saloon, and you're gonna come and stay in the station. What? Why? I don't know who wrote this note, but they are intending you harm, and they know where you're sleeping. Those two things don't go well together. So I'm putting you under my protection. You'll be staying here from now on, and I don't want no arguments. He's gonna lock me up. I'm not gonna let this guy get someone else. Not on my watch. The sheriff had a point. I wasn't afraid, but I could see the danger of some psychopath knowing where I slept. It might be better to move to the station with all the extra security locks here. There's a spare room in the back. Usually it's just full of papers and stuff, but I'll move things about and get it set up for you. Bring your stuff later on. His tone didn't invite no arguments. You got it, Sheriff. Good. For a moment, I almost thought I saw him twitch his mustache up in a smile. Then all of a sudden, it was gone, and the stern look was back in position. He's like, all according to plan. Now get out there and do your job, Greenhorn. Smiling into his constant frown, I nodded a farewell and left him in the office. I weren't sure how I felt about sleeping among the criminals. At the very least, I guessed, it saved me spending any more greenbacks to stay at Jed's. I stopped outside the station for a moment, running my hand over my chin. The best option had to be starting at Hollis's. No matter what Cartwright thought about the note, someone who'd pulled off a murder wouldn't go on and give themselves away like that. I'd maybe ask Jed about it later when I was grabbing my things. For now, though, I was going to follow my gut concerning the prime suspects and see where it took me. Ain't never gone wrong following my gut before. I headed off to Hollis's ranch, situated on the western edge of town. It could be like 2 separate incidents. Ranch. It was huge and sprawling, with a real nice fancy house attached. Hollis must have really been swimming in it. I looked around, but all I could see was one guy lifting lumber on the far side of the yard. Excuse me. The man heard my shout and looked up, squinting into the sun. He looked about 35, with neat hair that was starting to go gray, and he was smoking while he worked. I'm looking for Hollis Dalton. Is he around? The man crossed his arms, amused. Yeah, you're talking to him. I tried to hide my surprise that the big boss of the ranch was doing the drudge work. It seemed I was unsuccessful, though. I'm out here doing this because all my guys up and quit on me today. You're that outsider, right? The one who had that bust up with the sheriff the other day? That was yesterday? I felt a little embarrassed that that was how I was known here. Yeah, name's Lee McCarthy. It's nice to meet you. I held out my hand and he gave it a firm shake. So, what brings you to my ranch this morning, McCarthy? You want some work? Actually, Mr. Dalton, I'm here on behalf of the sheriff. I want to have a conversation with you, so while we talk, do you want my help with these logs? His expression shifted then. He looked at me a bit more warily, perhaps with a little more respect. Alright then. Have at 'em. He gestured for me to pick some up. They were dang heavy, and I weren't as young as I used to be, but I managed to lift them. I grunted with effort, but between the two of us, they'd help me because of their special protection. So I drew up a confiscation order and took it to Earl, hoping he'd sign it for me and move him on. I didn't get my answer, and next week, he turns up dead. Don't know if it was Cartwright himself or the Native Americans or what, but something fishy's about it, I'll say that much. I'm glad he's got you on the case, McCarthy. Keep an eye on him. He leaned back again, seemingly satisfied he'd got his point across. Really think the sheriff would be involved in a murder? Versus, ain't no way Cartwright would do anything like that, even though we just met the man. You really think the sheriff would be involved in a murder? Hollis looked grim. I've known John a long time, and he takes his job real serious. He's also a very passionate man, and if he believes in something, he'll do most anything for it. I ain't saying he did it himself, but he could easily be somewhere on the sidelines is all. The thought made me feel a little cold. By the end of our conversation, I had frustratingly little to go on. Hollis hadn't given me nothing of any use except accusations against the sheriff. Now, I still weren't 100% sure Cartwright weren't involved, but I'd have to keep that on the down low. Couldn't go around accusing people like him unless you had solid evidence, and a flimsy anecdote about a confiscation order wouldn't fly. Still, I resolved to watch him carefully. Alright. Well, I think that was all I wanted to ask about. Thank you for your time, Mr. Dalton. Hollis. Hollis, thank you for your time. I held out my hand again, and he shook it firm. Say McCarthy. I turned back, thinking maybe he thought of something else to tell me. If you ever get bored of detective work, come by and give me a hand, will you? Could use an extra pair of strong hands around here. You didn't hear me groaning, trying to pick up the logs? I gave him a grin. I sure will, Hollis. I'll see you. I left him to start chopping up the lumber and headed back out toward town. That had taken up most of the morning, and I didn't have nowhere else to go, so I went back to Dead Man's Rest. Walking into the cool saloon was a breath of fresh air after the heat of the day. Jed was there, wiping up the bar, and he grinned at me as I went in. Apart from him, it was mostly empty though, save a few drunks at the back. Howdy. Was wondering where you got off to. You slipped out real early. Yeah, couldn't sleep. Was something wrong with the room? You didn't have bed bugs or nothing. Oh no, nothing like that. Just woke up early and couldn't get it back, you know? He nodded understandingly. Yeah, I get that a lot too. I paused then and thought of the letter that had been put under my door. Say, Jed, you didn't put a note under my door last night, did you? He looked confused for a moment. No, why? Did you find something strange? Yeah, well, not strange, but never mind. If you didn't put it there, then it's fine. They weren't fine, but I didn't want him to tell anymore. I didn't want to tell him anymore. I trusted him to an extent, and I believed him when he said he didn't deliver it. But that didn't mean he needed to know every detail. He just shrugged and carried on wiping up. So, are you gonna stay longer? Actually, I'm moving out to the sheriff's station this afternoon. Really? After all that fuss outside the other day? He rubbed the back of my neck awkwardly. Well, yeah. Sheriff and I sorted our differences, and I'm helping him now. He suggested I take a room at the station. Mainly a money saver, you know? Don't know how long I'm gonna have to stick around after all. Jed looked almost amused. Sheriff's a tough nut to crack. He must have taken a liking to you if he's letting you stay at the station overnight like that, without being in a cell. I bet he liked your spunk. There's nobody in town that would have spoken back to him the way you did. I felt myself going a little red. Well, I wasn't gonna take this without telling him what I thought of him. Apparently, that was enough to earn you a medal around here. Well, anyways, hoping with two of us on the case, we'll crack it that much faster. We're just gonna be watching each other. He's sus of me, we're sus of him. You got any leads this morning? None yet. If I'm honest, I'm sure it was Wild Bill what done it, or at least one of his cronies. Not sure how we're gonna get a confession out of guys like that, though. They'd rather take a bullet than admit to what they'd done. Jed nodded sympathetically. Oh, Jesus. Then all of a sudden, he doubled over, crouching behind the bar. Whoa, Jed, you alright? I jumped off my stool and headed around the side of the bar. He was holding his stomach and retching something awful. As I came towards him, he held out a hand, stopping me getting any closer. Don't want you to catch it. I'll be... He didn't finish his sentence. Hunched up, he vomited all over the floor. That's sick, bro. Hold on, Jed. I'll get you a mop and bucket. I looked around to see if any other buggers in this place had even noticed. Figures, though. They were too deep in their cups and cards to even look our way. Suppose that was better for Jed. He probably didn't want people knowing he was sick. Yeah, serving them drinks. I found a mop and bucket outside by the outhouse and brought it back in. Jed had recovered a little when I got back. He was still wheezing something nasty, but he weren't retching no more. Sorry you had to see that, Lee. It ain't no odds. Look, let me help you clean. Why don't you sit? Nah, it's okay. I'm alright now. He took the mop off me and started swiping it over the floor. Look, do you mind not saying anything to them out there? I don't really want people knowing I'm not well. I hate fuss. He gave me a small smile, and I nodded. Sure, it's your business, Jed. I won't get involved. Hope you're feeling better sharpish. Thanks. When I was sure he'd be alright to carry on, I got up and went upstairs to gather my stuff. It was time I got back to the sheriff. No doubt he'd want to hear all I found this morning, and then chew me out when he found out I'd got nothing. Still, I wasn't helping him when nobody else was. Wait, I was helping him when nobody else was. That had to count for Summit. Before long, I was back downstairs and tipping my hat to Jed as I headed out the doors. He waved me off all cheery, as if nothing had happened. I gave him credit. Oh, I had to give him credit. He'd recovered from that episode mighty quick. It's like he has experience from it. Is there music playing? It's like really quiet. Options. Okay, there's like barely music playing. Not main menu. Return. Okay. Let me lower this a little bit. Okay. Expecting a real ticked off Cartwright, I sighed and made my way over to the station. Sure enough, when I got there, Cartwright was already frowning. He was bent over a bunch of papers, hand on his forehead, looking like he'd been at it a while. Me at work. I don't know what it was about seeing the sheriff all hot and bothered, but I liked the sight. What do you mean hot and bothered? He's doing paperwork. Busy, Sheriff? He looked up at me and then... Wait, he looked up at me then and glared. I can read, I promise. What's it look like? I dang well hope you've got good news for me, McCarthy, because I'm tearing my hair out here. My wig out, you mean. He gestured at all the papers strewn around his desk. I sat down heavily and sighed, and he didn't even try to hide his disappointment. Well, I went and talked to Hollis. He told me about a confiscation order he'd had drawn up that he had asked Dalton about and said it might have been the Native Americans. Nah. The sheriff shook his head with confidence. Dalton weren't never gonna sign that order. He told me so himself. He was on good terms with the natives. It's just Hollis being Hollis. You got anything else for me? I fingered the brim of my hat. After that, I went to Jed's and asked him if he'd given me that note. He said he didn't know nothing about it. I thought about mentioning the sick fit, but I'd promised Jed I wouldn't say anything. Say nothing, and it didn't seem relevant. After that, he vomited all over the floor, right in front of my face. That's all I turned up. Cartwright's eyes narrowed. Heck, McCarthy, you were supposed to dang well make yourself useful. What am I gonna do with this? You ain't got me even a shred closer to any kind of evidence. I remembered what Jed said. The sheriff liked me because of my pluck. It wouldn't do to back down now and let him think he'd beaten me. You're gonna fight him. At least I'm out here trying to give a dang to help you. Yeah. It's on a bowl. Don't act like you could have done any better. Yeah, don't act like you could have done any better, buddy. Only reason you had me going out there doing your work is because you couldn't turn up nothing up yourself. You couldn't turn nothing up yourself. No, that's not the only reason. Cartwright's eyes got real narrow. Don't you go talking back to me like that, McCarthy. I'm letting you help out here against my better judgment, so you better pay me a bit of respect. And the sheriff sighed and dropped back down in his chair. Go ahead and unpack your stuff in the back room. I got it ready for you. He's gonna lock us up in there. So I ain't off the case after today then? He fixed me with a look that could have made a cactus wilt. Get the heck out before I change my mind. I grinned. I was beginning to understand him. Leaving him to his paperwork, I went into the back to see my new diggings. They weren't pretty, I'll say that much. Just a glorified closet with stuff all around the walls and a ragged flea trap rolled out on the floor. But I was used to sleeping rough, so I could handle this easy. I dumped my bag and sat down on the bed, thinking hard. Surprisingly enough, I really did want to be useful to Cartwright. There was something about earning the respect of a man like him that made you really want to strive for it. Okay, hard to get. Didn't even know why I cared so much what he thought of me. But I knew I'd dang well work my butt off till he recognized I had some talent and admitted it. It was a challenge I'd unwittingly accepted, but was raring to go for. We got spunk. We've got pluck. I let out a long exhale and collapsed back on the bedroll. Tomorrow, maybe I'd go to Dalton's house, see if I couldn't dig up some evidence at the scene that the sheriff hadn't found. Like what? Seems though that fate had other plans for me. Okay. I was ripped rudely out of sleep in the middle of the night by crashing sounds and someone shouting, "F it all!" Sensing this couldn't be good, I scrambled out of my room. I came face to face with the sheriff, red-faced and flustered. F you, Effer McCarthy! He threw a punch, and luckily I had sense enough to duck. It looked like he would have broken my nose. I wasn't prepared for his next attack though, and while I was down, he kicked me square in the stomach. It threw me to the floor and I gasped in pain, trying to breathe. It'd been a long time since I'd been hit like that. What in the name of heck was that for? Cartwright turned away from me, running his hands through his hair, which for once looked anything other than pristine. Then he slammed his arms down by his sides and kicked the wall hard. You Evan let them get away! What do you mean I'm sleeping? He gestured at the cells in the small jail across from my room, which I only now just realized were open. I didn't touch that, I swear. Well, shoot. I guess I can understand why he was so mad. But that didn't mean there was any reason for him to take it out on me. I just about recovered, but I didn't dare stand up yet. He was still in a rage, and for all I knew, he might go for me again. And what? You think it had something to do with it, or what? You ain't got no right to be slinging punches at me. I'll do what I want, McCarthy. This is my dang office, which I'm graciously letting you use. And for all I know, you let out my effing prisoners, so yeah, I'm gonna let you know how I feel about it. How the heck could I let him out? I don't have the keys. Cartwright exhaled through his nose and started pacing again, ripping at his hair. His wig. What then? Am I expected to believe you just conveniently slept through this whole dang thing? I stood up then, spitting away the last of my breathlessness. You dumb. If they was getting out, don't you think they would have done it on the quiet? Especially knowing I was sleeping in the next dang room? You think Bill ran in here, all guns blazing, and woke up the whole town? Or do you think it might have been one guy with a lockpick? Sort your stuff out before you go slugging me next time. I glared at him, and he relented a little, maybe realizing that he'd been lashing out. You're right. You're right. We're about to have a shootout in here, man. Sorry. Though it wasn't a low voice and all covered over in frustration and curtness, I was sure I'd heard him right. I guess not many men had heard that word out of Cartwright's mouth. It's fine. I took a breath and went to stand next to him, inspecting the locks in the cells. As I suspected, they were picked, not broken. This had been a stealth operation. Cartwright sat down inside, putting his head in his hands. They were due to be put to the hangman tomorrow. Now I'm gonna have to explain why they ain't there, and there's gonna be a whole lot of questions. What kind of capable sheriff lets prisoners escape under his watch? Seeing Cartwright doubt himself was unsettling. I sat down on the bench next to him and cautiously clapped a hand to his shoulder, on his shoulder, still wary in case he tried to hit me again. He didn't, though. He just looked up at me with something like despair. We got time between now and tomorrow morning. Let's get him back, and the feds never need to know. His brown eyes searched me, calculating. They're bills. That means they'll be halfway back to his camp by now. This won't be an easy job. And I still don't trust you. If you were in on this for your own gain, then you could turn on me and take out Bill the second we get there. I met his gaze, willing him to believe me. Ain't no traitor to the law, and you dang well know it, Cartwright. It ain't too late. Let me help you get him back. He doesn't really know it. I ain't no traitor to the law. Slowly, he nodded. Yeah, I don't reckon you are. I mean, we did ask you permission to leave town. You're senseless, you sleep too deep, and you're junk at getting at your job, but you ain't a criminal. I snorted. Well, whether I'm bad at my job or not ain't something you'd know about, seeing as I'm a bounty hunter. Not right now, you ain't, McCarthy. He stood up, straightening his holster with a new look of determination. You're an officer of the law, and you're coming with me to bring these men back. There's the spirit, Cartwright. As soon as you start barking orders with that sharp tongue of yours, I know you're back to normal. He gave me a sidelong glance. Don't push your luck. With that, he set off out the building over to his horse, and I had to hold in a grin as I followed him. Life around the sheriff was keeping me on my toes, that was for sure. It's like the second day. He saddled me up on a second horse, and before long we were off and out, heading for Bill's camp. Judging by the position of the moon, the night was still pretty young. If they'd gone on foot, we might have had a chance to catch him up before they made it to Bill's. Seems, though, that this had been a well-organized jailbreak. We saw no trace of him all the way down the river, not even footprints. They definitely managed to get the jump on us. I glanced sidelong at Cartwright in the saddle as we galloped full pace. He was sitting straight up and rigid, facing forward with eyes fixed on the horizon. He didn't seem like too experienced of a rider, at least not at this speed. I could tell by his posture in the saddle. Try to relax your spine a little. Go with the motion of the horse. What? You're making her nervous. Relax a bit. Lean forward and go with her movements. He seemed miffed by my comment, but he slumped a little and leaned further forward as I told him. It was nice to see him taking advice, at least. Seemed the sheriff was used to being a lone wolf. I'd observed he spoke to a lot of people around town, and everyone seemed to respect him, but he kept them at a distance. First and foremost, he was the voice of the law, and he seemed like the type that sacrificed personal relationships for it. I mean, such a dedicated sheriff was surely a good thing, but it weren't no life being married to your job like that. One day, he'd wake up older and grayer, wondering where his youth had gone. I'd known plenty of men like him and seen where they ended up. Hopefully, this would be a good lesson to show him he didn't need to do everything alone. He sensed my staring and glared at me sharply. What now, McCarthy? Got something on my shirt? I was just thinking how much more natural you looked in the saddle since you relaxed a little. He says, shut the heck up. Good work. Was it me, or did the sheriff just go red? It was hard to tell in the moonlight, but I was pretty sure he was acting bashful. Seems he was on a challenge of his own to distract me as much as he possibly could. Eyes ahead, McCarthy. We're getting to the camp. I chuckled. Sure thing, Sheriff. No chemistry. Nothing. He was right. We slowed our horses to a walk as we came upon a high ridge that looked down into a gully. I could see from our vantage point an old farmhouse set down by the river with 2 men standing guard outside it while lights flickered inside. That was for sure our target. They couldn't see us from where they were standing, so we dismounted quietly and shuffled up to the very edge of the rocky ridge. The sheriff spoke in a low whisper. Can't see how many are in there, but I'm expecting at least 5. Easy, maybe more. What's the plan, boss? Cartwright stroked his chin thoughtfully. Still, the approach ain't gonna work. They probably know we're gonna come straight after them. If we can take out the guards before alerting the rest of them, then our numbers would be more even. Between the 2 of us, maybe we can force them into a surrender. If not, well, we need at bare minimum the 2 of them we came for to come back for the handman, and... He fixed me with a piercing gaze, what cut down into my soul. I want Wild Bill alive, McCarthy. I know you wanted to come here in the first place to get him, but if he's connected to Dalton, we need a confession. I grit my teeth. I'll try, Sheriff, but that's all I can promise you. I got something very personal against Bill, and he likes to push all the wrong buttons and bring up painful stuff. You can be sure he'll mouth off and taunt me. And I don't know that I'm strong enough a man to take it without pushing back. Cartwright scrutinized me carefully. I could tell he was curious, but he didn't ask nothing, just fixed me with a hard stare. Never mind that, McCarthy. You're working under me now. I came here to get those men back, not to satisfy your personal grudge. Unless he directly threatens you, I want you to bring him in. It was all I could do to force the agreement out of my clenched jaw. I told you I'll do my best, Sheriff, and that's all I can promise. He didn't look convinced, but he shifted his eyes back to the farmhouse. You ready to do this? I thought of Wild Bill's grinning face, the last time I saw him when he got away from me. We were here for one reason and one reason only, and I had to remember that, no matter how angry he made me. I opened my eyes and nodded. Let's go. We shuffled down the ridge, staying as quiet as possible. Shiga, 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 shiga. Lucky for us, the guards weren't paying much attention, talking between themselves and smoking. One of them was short and bald, the moonlight shining off his head. The other guy had a pretty round belly and waved his arms around as he talked about something. Seemed like Bill hadn't put his best people on scouting duty. Dude, they're, baiting us. I watched as Cartwright carefully pulled out his peacemaker and checked it was ready for action. Another term for a pistol or revolver. Yeah, my peacemaker, alright. His hands were deft and nimble, never fumbling once as he went over the grooves and made sure it was fully loaded. It was mesmerizing, and I had to force myself to snap out of it and focus before he noticed me staring. He left me in charge of subduing the ones we needed alive, not trusting me to be light with the trigger. Their faces from the pokey vaguely came to my mind. The pokey! A cell in a prison or jail. Sheriff looked over at me one last time, and I nodded. We couldn't be the aggressors, because we were officers of the law. This was a strange feeling to get used to. Evening, boys. Now, are you going to come quietly, or are we doing this the hard way? Taken by surprise, it took the bandits a second to realize the sheriff already had his gun trained on them. The pot-bellied one yelled and went for his holster, but the minute he laid a finger on it... Oh. 2 splatterings of blood. Cartwright shot him clean through the chest. His buddy went all pale and held his hands up, but once the sheriff lowered his gun, quick as a flash, his hands went down to his own holster. Bad idea, buddy. You really thought. Cartwright was quicker, though, and in a single moment, the bald head crashed onto the ground as he bled out from his chest. Sheriff gave me a sidelong glance while blowing the smoke from his gun. I ain't allowed to shoot people, even if they deserve it, you see. Not by federal law. Not unless they go for their gun, which is a direct threat against me, and then I'm permitted to take action to defend myself. The second they laid a finger on their holsters, they were done for. Color me impressed. Oh my god, he's smiling. I got the impression Cartwright just didn't like violence, but seeing him inspect the bodies carefully stow away his gun, I could see I'd been wrong. He was just following the rules. Immediately, I had a new level of respect for him. He straightened up and motioned me over. Lucky for us, looks like them inside didn't hear. Come with me, and let's see how many of them we're up against. I followed close behind him. He seemed to know what he was doing, and though I'd always worked alone, I'd never been much of a planner. I always found it easier to run in guns blazing and ask questions after. Of course, that was a lot more conducive to my kind of job than his. So in this particular instance, I was happy letting him take the lead. We crept over to the farmhouse and peered in the window. It looked like Bill didn't have the kind of following he used to. There were only 3 guys in there, all playing cards around a table. It was a miracle they didn't notice the racket we made with the guards. 2 of them were the ones that had been in prison. None of them seemed to have noticed anything going on outside, focused as they were on the game, which set us up real nicely. Bill himself weren't nowhere to be seen. Alright, McCarthy, we go in on 3. I'll handle the arrest. You take the one who ain't coming back with us. And Bill? He's sure to be nearby. What happens when he comes in? Cartwright gave me a hard stare. We need to question him on the count of murdering the mayor, so we'll try to talk to him. If that don't work, you leave it to me, you hear? I swallowed and nodded. Alright, on my count then, McCarthy. 1, 2, 3. On 3, we scrambled up, rounded the door, and entered the room, revolvers drawn. The guys at the table finally looked round, startled. Hands up, boys. We've got an appointment with the hangman come morning. I'm giving you mudsills. I read that as mustelids. I was like, interesting insult for the Wild West. I'm giving you mudsills 3 seconds to put your hands in the air. As this was going on, I was on edge, looking around for Bill to come out of nowhere. Surely he'd have heard our voices by now. I ain't got no date with the rope, Sheriff. I'm sure he can make room for one more, given you've been found in the company of known fugitives from the law. Unless you want to try and convince me you weren't involved in breaking him out. Depends. Would it work? I wasn't born yesterday, Chief. Now, hands up. The bandit began to grow indignant and shuffled in his seat. Not a good sign. Well, why should we go back with you anyway? Bound for the hangman or dying here? Ain't no difference. Well, you can make your choice. Face the gallows and you get a proper burial with a priest and all. But if I'm forced to kill you for resisting arrest, well, I won't have no problem leaving your bodies out here in the desert for the vultures. So, what's it gonna be, lads? Slowly, reluctantly, the trio complied, lifting their hands up with fluffy looks at both of us. Good choice. McCarthy, tie him up. I ain't got enough iron for all of them. I took a length of rope off Cartwright's belt and set about it. I didn't look none of them in the face as I tied the knots. I still felt awful off, being a sheriff's assistant and doing things all official with the big man himself watching me. One by one, we led them out of the farmhouse and over to where we left the horses, loading all three on the back of them and tying the ropes securely. With the horses tethered and their arms and legs bound, it was safe enough to assume they weren't going nowhere fast. We still hadn't seen no sign of Bill. Maybe he weren't there at all. Had he gone off elsewhere? Or somewhere? It didn't make no sense though. Why would he leave his men? Any one of you want to tell me where Wild Bill is? Huh. Bill's gone off the deep end. Probably passed out somewhere in his cups. One of the others nudged him, and he seemed to realize he shouldn't be saying anything. He shut up after that and glared. I exchanged a troubled glance with Cartwright. Was that why so many of them had left him? Bill turned to alcoholism? It didn't sound like the Wild Bill I remembered. Smug grin and gruff voice proclaiming he was doing God's work. What had to have happened to a man like Bill to push him that far off the edge? Mystery! McCarthy. Oh. McCarthy! Cartwright had a warning tone in his voice. I motioned him over towards me, way out of earshot of the men on the horses. We got what we came for. No, not all of it. You wanted a confession, Sheriff. You're gonna pass up on the opportunity to get it? Without that, you know you ain't got on anyone in town, and Dalton's gonna be a footnote in history, a failed case you never solved. His mouth was a thin line, the corners of his eyes narrow. Stop letting your personal grudges get in the way of your job, McCarthy. My job is, and always will be, bringing Bill to justice one way or another. Now I'm going back in that farmhouse and bringing him out. Oh, there he is. Ain't no need. I'm right here. I whipped round to see the man himself standing at the entrance to the house, all alone. He seemed different from when I last saw him. Smaller somehow. His aura weren't the same as it once been. As I watched him, he staggered, and I noticed a bottle in his hand. So what then? You taken away my men? Cartwright drew his gun and pointed it straight at Bill's heart. William McCoy, you're under arrest under suspicion of murdering Mayor Dalton of Golders Rock. Hands in the air. Bill barked out a laugh. Get that impotent thing out of my face, Sheriff. I know very well you can't use it. Cartwright immediately went pale, but his face contorted in anger. I'm warning you, McCoy. Don't provoke me. You have 3 seconds to surrender. Oh! Or what? You'll shoot me? Go right ahead, Sheriff. 1. 2. His hand trembled. Bill was pushing him hard. For a second, I wondered whether he might actually do it. 3. Bill didn't even flinch. He stood there, staring the sheriff direct in the eyes with a wry smile. Told you. You need me to confess to killing your mayor. You won't kill me, not until you've got your information. Or you've got nothing. And I got no intention of giving you anything. So it seems we're at an impasse, don't it? Furious at having his bluff called, Cartwright's hands were white on the gun, and his face was turning red. I could feel his anger. I had been made a fool of by Bill before. The man had a way of getting under your skin, in all the worst possible ways. Saying you won't give us anything implies you got something to give, Bill. For the first time, Bill's eyes focused on me properly. I know you. Then they widened as he recognized me in the darkness. God dang. McCarthy. So you followed me all the way out here, did you? And now you're what? Sheriff's little butt. Needed some backup before you could face me again? Was that it? He was leering, grinning, swaying back and forth. He gained back some of his old swagger. I forced myself to ignore his taunts, though. I was comforted by the knowledge that as soon as he let slip anything about Dalton, I'd shoot him dead. Just had to focus on getting the conversation back on track. There ain't nobody else around here who would have done it, Bill. Just give it up. Ha! You'd both be funny if you weren't so dang pathetic. At that second, I felt rather than saw the sheriff launch himself at Bill from beside me. Bill didn't have time to react, still laughing, when Cartwright landed square on his chest, throwing him to the ground. The bottle fell out of his hand with a clunk and rolled away. He kicked out, yelling in anger, but Cartwright rolled away from the blow and held Bill down with his forearm across the man's throat. I suddenly realized I was just standing there watching. Holstering my gun, I ran over to where Bill struggled, wheezing. Cartwright grimaced up at me. Help me with this. Help me with this, would ya? Here, take these ropes. Tie up his legs. We'll get him to talk to us before the night is out. We've got some time before we have to get them to town. You got it, Sheriff. I took the rope off him and wound it around Bill's legs, careful to avoid the angry kick he aimed at my head. Then, finding I had some length left, I tied his hands for good measure. Between us, with Bill hogtied, we managed to drag him back into the farmhouse and sit him on a rickety chair. Interrogation time! He glared murder at us, his face red and his eyes bloodshot. Clearly, he was in a real bad way. Cartwright leaned back against the table, casually, his eyebrows raised. He knew he was in control now. Where were we then? You were just about to confess to the murder of the mayor, if I remember right. Huh, you'd be funny if it weren't so sad, Cartwright. Let me tell you something. If you want it so bad, as a show of pity, I didn't kill your dang mayor, and I don't know who did. That good enough for you? And why should we believe you? Why, innocent until proven guilty, Sheriff? Or is that not how it's done in America anymore? You've been proven guilty of a heck of a lot already, McCoy. One more wouldn't exactly be difficult to add to the tally. You wound me, Sheriff. Those are some hefty charges you're laying at my door. I never killed a law-abiding man. You and me, we're on the same side. I even done some of your job for you. For the first time, Cartwright's eyebrows met in a confused frown. This weren't good. If he started listening to what Bill had to say, he'd get sucked in. Bill could turn any situation to his advantage, and as much as I trusted the sheriff to do what was right, I knew Bill like no other man. He was dangerous, even in this state. No matter what you think you did, I know what the law says, and you're a criminal, McCoy. I'm gonna give you one more chance to come with me. And what? Tell you nothing about the mayor and then face the hangman? I'd rather be shot dead on the spot. I don't care about no priest or no burial. Death is death, and I know I done what's right by me. But you won't shoot me, will you? He had a strange gleam in his eye. It was almost like he was goading him, trying to get shot. I couldn't figure it out. What was Bill doing? What did he stand to gain? Cartwright was fully shaking now, but he still didn't pull his gun out. I hear a lot of things, and I know you, John Cartwright. You won't shoot me because you're a good sheriff, and you do everything according to Hoyle. Then Bill's manic eyes turned to me. But you, McCarthy, you ain't no sheriff. You got a whole other moral code. Sounds like you do too, Bill, if you think any of what you did is right by anyone. He laughed, almost hysterically. I didn't know what to make of this Bill. His mood was all up and down like a pendulum. I could see what this man meant by him going off. What his man meant by him going off the deep end, that was for sure. But you see, McCarthy, you and I are the exact same. 'Cause you kill men what broke the law, and so do I. Can't argue with that now, can you? Cartwright glanced sidelong at me as I grit my teeth. He was technically right. Now, why was it you were chasing me again? I got so many enemies with so many grudges that sometimes it's hard to remember. You know dang well why. I knew he'd do this sooner or later. He liked to make every encounter as painful as possible for me. Nope. It ain't coming back to me. You'll have to help me recall. He was smirking, his eyes full of mischief. I wanted so badly to wipe that smirk off his face, but I couldn't. I promised Cartwright I wouldn't. Well, it ain't important right now. Oh, but I think it is, McCarthy. It's important to remember the past and the things we've done. They can affect us in the here and now. Shoot. Now he was bringing up the past, and I knew just where he was going to go with it. Problem was, I didn't know how to stop him. For instance, does the sheriff know he's working with a criminal? Cartwright started and eyed Bill suspiciously. Oh, it seems he does not. You didn't tell him nothing then, McCarthy? Well, Cartwright, I think you should know the truth. Your little partner here has done his fair share of law-breaking. See, You shut up, Bill. The words came out of my mouth before I even knew I was saying them. I surprised myself with the volume. Even Bill's men must have heard that from outside. There weren't nothing else to be done, though. I couldn't let Bill tell the sheriff that detail about me. It'd been something I kept to myself, mostly because it was a need-to-know thing that Cartwright didn't need to know. Bill had a eating grin like a weasel in a henhouse. It was like nothing I'd ever seen from a hog-tied man in an interrogation before. Oh, you gonna make me, McCarthy? Go on, use that gun of yours. I can see in your eyes that you want to. I grit my teeth and stared him down. Not gonna bite, huh? Well, let's talk some more then, shall we? Love this. He has the highest speech. Yeah, let's talk about how you killed Dalton. Oh, McCarthy with a comeback? Bill shook his head, still with the same grin on his face. It made me feel sick. Nah, let's talk about Jimmy Kiefer. All my muscles froze up at once, hearing it come out of Bill's mouth. I knew that SOB remembered. Cartwright was watching our whole conversation with interest, not saying a word, his gun still trained on Bill. Don't you say that name. You don't have the right. Touched a sore spot, have I? I'll say what I like. Put an end to me if you're man enough, McCarthy. Do what you came here to do. Do what you dreamed of doing for 8 years. That's a long time. Do it for your little boyfriend you miss so much. I clenched my fist to stop myself drawing my gun. It was getting harder and harder to ignore him. You want to die that badly, Bill? I'm tired, McCarthy. I'm done with it all. There ain't nothing left for me to live for. His eyes were more gaunt than ever before, looking dead into mine. Suddenly, I realized. He was doing everything on purpose. He wanted us to kill him. He wanted out. He literally just said that, bro. What do you mean you realized? He was ready for us. He expected us. God knows, he probably arranged the breakout to draw us out to him. He wanted to die, but he was too much of a coward to pull the trigger himself. so he had us brought here to do it for him. Some tiny part of me felt bad for him, to lose all hope and all reason for living, be driven to total and utter despair. Then I remembered what he'd done. No, he deserved nothing better. Your conscience finally caught up with you, Bill? Can't say I blame you. I couldn't live with myself neither. Huh. You ain't got a clue, McCarthy. I don't regret what I done. Not one dang thing. Not killing Kiefer either. I'm just tired of doing it. I believed him. He didn't feel one bit of remorse. Taking a deep breath, I turned away from him. Well, if you want to die, Bill, I ain't gonna help you. You're gonna have to face God on your own terms. I gestured to Cartwright, not meeting his eyes. He was a smart man, and I was sure he figured out what my secret was by now. I still didn't really know what to say to him or how to act, so I avoided meeting his eyes. Come on, Sheriff, we ain't getting nothing out of him. We'll be getting light out soon. We should get back to town for the hangman. Cartwright nodded slowly, giving Bill one final look, then turned to walk away with me. We're just gonna leave him there? Okay. Bill would find a way to get out of those ropes, no doubt, but I found I didn't care no more. Let him get away. I'll find him again. I couldn't believe I was about to walk away from the man I'd been chasing so long, but I'd known, when I came here tonight, that it wasn't for revenge. It was to help Cartwright get back those men, and we'd done that. For now, this weren't the fight I'd wanted it to be. I didn't feel like I was disrespecting Jimmy by walking away either. Maybe before, I would've, but recently he'd been further from my mind than ever. Just as I was thinking that, Bill spoke up one last time. He's got more to say. Walking away then? Well, seeing as you came all the way out here for me, McCarthy, let me give you a party gift. Something about Jimmy Kiefer that you never knew. I told you not to say his goddamn name. And I told you to effing stop me if you're man enough. Bill's sudden roar stopped me in my tracks. I'd never heard such raw desperation in anyone's voice before. I looked back and saw him glaring at me with hate-filled eyes. You gonna stop me, McCarthy? Because if you don't, I'm gonna tell you all about Kiefer. You thought he was the love of your life, didn't you? Well, he didn't think so. I knew better than to listen to Bill. But still, I couldn't help myself. He was the only other person I knew who'd seen Jimmy alive, and in some small way, that connected us, much as I hated to admit it. I forced myself to listen to his next words, though the feeling of dread inside told me they weren't going to be what I wanted to hear. Kiefer was never yours, McCarthy. He went about with anyone and told them all he loved them. You're lying, Bill. You're a goddamn liar. He had to be. It weren't true. He drowned me out, talking over me, his words flowing out like a tidal wave. You didn't think you were the only one, did you? You effing Nancys are pathetic. He tried it with me once, and he didn't like taking no for an answer. I was shaking, my memories of Jimmy getting mixed up with what Bill was saying. It couldn't be true. It was Bill lying to me, messing with my head. Jimmy would never do that to me. He and I, you'd never understand what we had. Bill, because nobody could ever love someone like you. You still think I'm lying? Well, let me tell you then. When he tried to stick his disgusting in me, and before I pushed him off, I got an eyeful. He had a tattoo, didn't he, McCarthy? No. No. It couldn't be possible. Bill couldn't know about that. If he did, then a little anchor, right? See, McCarthy, all you homosexuals are disgusting freaks of nature. Bill's words, not mine. But Kiefer was even worse than the rest of you. The worst kind of man. Before I knew it, I'd drawn my gun, aiming at Bill. I didn't even know what I was doing anymore, except that Bill somehow knew about Jimmy's tattoo. And how did he know about Jimmy's tattoo? Jimmy was everything to me, everything I'd ever cared about. My head swam with confusion, and my hands shook hard. Bill grinned again, displaying his smug smirk that I hated so dang much. You're a freaking liar, Bill! Maybe I am McCarthy, and maybe I'm not. But you ain't never gonna know, because Kiefer ain't here to tell you. Because I killed him. I blew his goddamn head off, and I don't regret it for a second. He didn't regret it. My head was pounding. How's it feel, McCarthy? Learning that the man you wasted 8 years of your life on trying to avenge didn't give up about you. Oh! Bill's pretty good. Not gonna lie. Good at that. Good at baiting. I heard the shot before I was even aware I'd pulled the trigger. Bill collapsed, the grin on his face frozen as the light left his eyes. I was breathing real heavy, my thoughts a mess. What the heck was that, McCarthy? Where were you, John? Where were you? Sheriff. Cartwright seemed to have come to his senses, snapping out of whatever shocked state he'd been in after hearing that tirade. Oh, he was listening. He was spectating. He came storming round, standing right in front of me, looking ticked off as anything. I give you strict instructions not to kill him. Somehow I pulled together enough mental energy to reply. You weren't going to confess anything, Sheriff. If he killed Dalton, he'd go to his grave without saying a word. That ain't the point. Don't you get it? I gave you a direct command, and you disobeyed me. I looked hard into Cartwright's gaze, finally putting away my revolver. It was true. I'd gone against his orders. It didn't feel good to have let him down. But by the same token, though, he had no right to scream at me like he was. In any case, Bill was of no further use to him. I ain't one of your men. Or, sorry, I got a bit carried away. Let's go with I ain't one of your men. I'm an effing bounty hunter and I brought him in dead. Deal with it. I kicked at Bill's dead body and stormed away before he could say anything back. I'd been out of line, but the things Bill had been saying, I couldn't handle them. 8 years, bro. The sheriff needed to understand that. Of course, I knew Bill was saying it all on purpose, to provoke me, but it dang well worked. What's Jimmy's story, huh? The walk back to the town was long and tiring. It was almost dawn, and I was beat. I chanced a few glances at the sheriff as we walked back. Wait, why are we walking on the horses, or walking the horses back to town? I chanced a few glances at the sheriff as we walked back, but I didn't know what to say to him. He heard every dang thing that had come out of Bill's mouth, and Lord knows what he thought of me. I weren't ashamed of being who I was, but I knew that particularly for Cartwright, there was a legal aspect to it that he'd struggle with. That was even if he didn't have personal objections. Perhaps it'd be best if I left town after all this. Make it easier on everyone. Lord knows I needed time to clear my head as well. What Bill had said about Jimmy had shaken me deep. Something told me it wasn't true, and even if some part of it was so far in the past. But it still hurt to think that Jimmy hadn't loved me the way I did him. It couldn't have been anything but lies. I reassured myself as we slowly made our way back. That's kind of rough, McCarthy. Rough for you, bud. When we got into town, I said a short farewell to the sheriff, then went straight back to my room. Whatever happened from here on out, nothing would ever be the same as before. Emo time. I woke up a few hours later, still feeling dog-tired. Sleeping hadn't been easy, and it weren't restful. I knew Cartwright deserved a proper apology. Whatever way you sliced it, I still acted out at Bill's hideout. Sighing, I dragged myself up out of bed and went to go and find him. As I passed his office on my way out of the station, I noticed the door was open. Okay, CG. Glancing inside, I could see the sheriff sitting with his back to me, one arm leaning on the desk, staring out the window. He looked like he'd been there a while. Sheriff? He didn't turn around. Yeah? Can I come in? Do what you like, McCarthy. You always do. His voice was barbed and unfriendly. It pierced me in a way I didn't even know I could feel anymore. Oh heck, I'd gone and got sweet on him, hadn't I? Of all the men in America. Well, that wasn't important right now. Look, Cartwright, I'm sorry. I was under orders and I disobeyed you. Regardless of the reason, I shouldn't have done it, and I wanted to apologize. My bad. Sheriff, my bad. He hates us. He turned around then and looked at me hard. His face was gaunt and gray, and his eyes were more tired than I'd ever seen them. He looked 10 years older. Even his hair was slightly out of place, for the first time in my recollection. It's been 3 days. Apology accepted, McCarthy. He paused then, and I knew what was coming. I slid into a seat opposite him at the desk, bracing myself for it. He buried his head in his hands and with an audible sigh asked what I'd been dreading answering. Is it true? Which part? You know which part, McCarthy. The part where you're a homosexual. The part where you engage in acts of sodomy with another man. Hearing how he said it stung, but I answered him nonetheless. Yeah, it's true. It's true. He looked up at me with another long sigh and frowned. His eyes were full of some emotion I couldn't rightly place. Why would you tell me that? I'm an officer of the law, and sodomy is 5 years in prison. Surely you know that I'm duty-bound to arrest you. 5 years in prison? Ugh. I considered him for a minute. He was a man who prided himself on following the law to the letter, even though I'd never met a sheriff who'd arrested a man for sodomy. But it didn't sound like he was trying to actually make good on his claim this time. It was more like he wanted to be persuaded out of it. Luckily, I knew by now what kind of man Cartwright was. Look, Sheriff. I know that you always try to do everything according to Hoyle, but sometimes, even you know that the law ain't always right. The difference between a good sheriff and a bad one, and between a good man and a bad one, is the willingness to do what he knows is right. No matter what the law tells him. Save. You're a good man and a good sheriff, and I know you ain't gonna hang a man for loving someone. He didn't say hanging, he said 5 years prison. Do you really think that something like that is worth a man's life? It's only been our 3rd day with him. You're a good man and good sheriff? Sure. I know you ain't gonna hang a man for loving someone. He's gonna be like, oh yeah, watch this. Cartwright sighed again and looked away, shaking his head. No, you're right. I'm not. But where's the line drawn, McCarthy? Lately, I'm just not sure anymore. It's so hard being the person that has to set an example, with pressure from the townsfolk and the federal government. And it's just me here, you know? I'm just a man. He's just a man. Sometimes it's hard to understand what's right and what isn't. Some things don't feel like justice, but when I start to add personal morality into my job, where does it end? At what point am I no longer fit to be a sheriff? If you don't mind me saying, I don't think there's ever been a man born who was more fit to be a sheriff than you. Cartwright smiled for the first time, and some of the life came back into his face. I suppressed an urge to lean over and move a strand of hair out of his eyes. Oh my god, don't do that right after he was contemplating arresting me. Justice, just like morality, is only a man-made concept. The law was made by men like us, and some crimes aren't the same as others. What I did was wrong by God and by law, but it didn't hurt nobody. I think it's in every man's heart to decide what he thinks is wrong and what's not. And I think you're a good man, and you know when to listen to what your heart says. We fell into a strange silence after I stopped speaking, and the atmosphere in the room shifted. Cartwright was looking at me with a searching gaze. I could tell he was lost in his thoughts, trying to work out some inner struggle. For the first time, I fully appreciated how hard it must be to be a sheriff. Upholding the law isn't always easy, and I respected him all the more for being the face of it. Where's the window? I grinned at him, and slowly I saw a smile break out over his face as well. My chest fluttered a bit, and I cursed myself again. Stop, dang it. He don't want you. The light. It's so bright. Dang, McCarthy, you're right. Thanks. I didn't do nothing except break the law. Yeah, don't remind me, or I'll have no choice but to take you to the gallows. I chuckled, and he followed suit. It felt nice to laugh again, after all that happened recently. When the laughter died down, the sheriff started to look thoughtful again. Was he a good man then, your Jimmy? You bet. He was one of the best of us. Tell me about him. I'd like to know what kind of man he was. Normally, my throat closed up when I thought about Jimmy. It was always too hard to talk about him. Now, though, I found the words flowing out of my mouth easy, as you like. He was one of them guys who just couldn't ever be put down, you know? No matter what bad stuff had happened, you could count on Jimmy to stand there with a smile and tell you it'd be alright, and sometimes he made it so. It was a credit to our town, most popular guy you ever saw. I could feel the smile creeping up over my face as I remembered. He'd always be surrounded by people in the saloon, laughing like he didn't have a care. Dang, but I missed him. Cartwright was watching me with a small smile of his own. Don't you let what that scum said affect you, you hear? His sharp words startled me out of my memories. McCoy was always full of BS. He could have forked out about that tattoo any number of ways, so don't let him trick you into thinking bad of your old friend. Remember him as you always did. A lump formed in my throat. I hadn't even thought about how much what Bill said had hurt me back there. It all seemed so distant now. I knew in my heart there weren't no way Jimmy would have ever done anything to hurt me. The sheriff's words rang in my mind. He was right. It'd be wrong to let anything get in the way of remembering Jimmy the way he really was. Suddenly, a wave of tiredness hit me all over again, and I blinked. This whole night had really taken its toll. I'm gonna head back to bed. I'm beat. Yeah, I should get some sleep as well. He certainly looked like he could use it, though I suppose I didn't look much better. I got up to leave and nodded to the sheriff. Get some rest, Cartwright. He replied with a shaky note in his voice. Hey, call me John. Jimmy and John? John and Jimmy? We're friends now, after all. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, recalling earlier on when I thought he was kind of a lone wolf in this town. That must have taken a lot for him to say. Oh, there's so many options in his route, I feel like. Thanks, I'm glad to know you, John. Thanks, though I'm sure you won't be saying that. What? Though I'm sure you won't be saying the same next time I screw up. Yeah, let's make a little joke, see. I could tell he was nervous, so I tried to lighten the mood a little with the joke. He was deadpan serious, though. No, I mean it, McCarthy. Call me John. I relented, nodding with a twist of my mouth. Alright, John, I will. And by the way, it's Lee. With a final nod, I left the office and closed the door behind me. I was very glad to have had that conversation, getting some insight into what John was thinking. And I had to be honest, I was relieved that he still felt like he could be friends with me, knowing who I really am. That meant a lot more than I think he realized, especially given how I was starting to feel about him. It seemed like he'd been so nervous about being friends, though, that I'd have to hide that at all costs. He wouldn't react very well, that was for sure. Not to mention his own personal sense of justice was still all messed up. With the air clear between me and John, I could get some proper rest. As I lay in bed, waiting for sleep to take me, my last thoughts were of Jimmy at the old bar, winking at me and waving with his old cheeky smile. And suddenly we're being smothered in our sleep by a pillow, because there's still that threat, that note. I woke up a few hours later in the mid-afternoon sunshine in the window, to the mid-afternoon sunshine in the window, and the sound of the telegram printing loudly in the sheriff's office. A few minutes later, I was fully dressed and out of the room, figuring I'd do all I could to help John clean up after last night. I found him in his office, papers strewn all over, pulling the page out from the telegraph. He seemed very excited. What up, John? Lee, you're just in time. I've been sorting through all the paperwork, and I've just now had a reply from the federal government. Oh, what have you been working on? They were pleased with our work regarding the hangman's visit this morning, and they've approved your bounty on Wild Bill. He clapped his hands together and stood up from behind the desk, dropping the telegram on the table where I could see it. On behalf of the United States of America, I'd like to present you with your reward. He opened a drawer with a little key from his pocket and pulled out a blank checkbook, riffling through to a clean page. When he ran out the correct amount and signed it off with a flourish, he offered it to me with a friendly smile. Hey, I can't take the credit for this, John. You did more than half the work to get us there. You should take some of it too. The sheriff looked taken aback, as if he hadn't even conceived of the idea. Nah, you're the bounty hunter here. I was just doing my job, and so were you. Difference is, I get a salary. So take this. You earned it. I took the check from his hand reluctantly, shoving it down into my pocket and still feeling guilty about the whole thing. It was nice to have my bounty, but I couldn't help but feel like I didn't fully deserve it. John smiled again and sat down behind the desk. He seemed unusually chirpy this morning. I slid into my usual chair opposite, curious. What's got you in such a good mood? He shrugged and went a little red. Dang, but if that wasn't adorable. Got a lot of things worked out since last night. Talking to you really cleared my head. I'm feeling a lot more focused now, like I can knuckle down and finally do this job right. I'm glad I helped. So what's on the agenda for today then? You got any more leads I can follow up on? The sheriff looked nonplussed, stopping shuffling his papers for a moment to tilt his head at me. The heck you on about, Lee? You're done here. You got your bounty. No need to be hanging around here anymore. The thought of leaving sent a chill down my spine. Where would I even go? What would I do now? Now that Bill was dead, my goal of the last 8 years was completed. I didn't have nothing to do no more. I tried not to show the sheriff how terrifying the thought was. But what about Dalton? The murder? John shrugged again. I know it sure as heck weren't you, so there's no sense keeping you here. As much as McCoy claimed he had nothing to do with it, I'm sure it was him or one of his thugs. Problem is, we've got no way of really proving it now. But I'm probably gonna call the case closed anyhow. Yeah. He seemed a little despondent as the words left his mouth, as if he didn't want to admit that he hadn't got it perfect. I could sympathize. For a man like John to have to admit defeat, even in such a small way, it couldn't have been easy. Then again, something was niggling at me. Like there was something I'd forgotten to do or say. It couldn't be declared over just yet. I had a feeling we'd missed an important clue. Not just yet. What in blazes are you on about? Don't call the case just yet. Let me take one more look around. There has to be something we've missed. John sighed and turned to face me fully. This time there was no doubt. He really did look a little sad. I told you, Lee, it ain't your problem no more. You're free to go. Get out of here. A man like you don't want to be stuck in a town like this any longer than he has to be, right? It was true that all I'd thought of since arriving in Golders Rock was leaving it. If I was going to get on with my life, which I had to do at some point, then sooner it would be easier than later. That feeling just wouldn't go away. I looked into John's serious brown eyes and made my decision. Another choice. Another choice. We're in this together and I'm going nowhere till we've got our man. Can he reject us? The sheriff's eyebrows shot up, almost off his head. Some of the sadness I'd seen in his face vanished just like that, and I wondered if some of it was because he thought I'd leave. Perhaps that was too much to hope for. You sure about that, Lee? You know, I honestly think it was McCoy that done it. Even if you stick around, there's no guarantee we'll find anything that says otherwise. I'm sure. I don't quit a job halfway, Sheriff. We've still got business together yet. John's smile cracked his face from ear to ear. I couldn't remember ever seeing him so happy before. His usual frown was nowhere to be seen. Smiling like that made him look so much younger, more free. Well, dang, Lee. I don't know how to thank you. Buy me a drink when we catch him, and we'll call it even. How's that? You got yourself a deal. He leaned back, putting his arms behind his head, seeming more relaxed than ever. I liked this new leaf he seemed to have turned over. There was so much less tension in his posture and expressions. The stuff about morality and justice we talked over last night must have really been weighing on him before. Well, I guess all I can do now is give you access to anywhere and everywhere you want to go. You're officially with me now, so you've got most of all the authority I would. So from now on, nobody gets in your way for this case, and if they do, they'll answer to me. You make sure and tell them, you hear? Loud and clear, Sheriff. I had an idea, actually. Before all that went on last night, I'm going to check out the Dalton residence. John leaned forward, putting his elbows on the desk. Well, it's the same as it was the night I discovered it. Haven't moved nothing, and nobody's been allowed on the property since. He fished in a desk drawer and pulled out a large iron key, which he handed over to me. This unlocks the main gate, and the front door should already be open. I'm fairly sure I found everything, but who knows? A fresh set of eyes might be just what we need. Good luck, Lee. I'll make it worth your while to trust me with it, Sheriff. I gripped the key in my hand with a new determination. Something about this case suddenly really mattered to me. Solving it became important to me. John's downcast gaze, when he thought he'd have to give up, had lit a spark. I couldn't let him down on this one. I wouldn't. Grabbing my hat, I said my farewells to the sheriff and headed out of the office. The sky was turning orange with the setting sun already. Dang, I must have slept for a long time. There weren't many folk out and about at this hour. Most would have already headed home for the evening, or over to Dead Man's Rest. Seems the sheriff was the only one who worked around the clock. Before long, I found myself at the gates of Dalton's. Yep. It was a grand old estate, surrounded on all sides by a tall fence. The whole place looked terribly lonely. I unlocked the front gate with the key John had given me and made my way inside the front yard. The house loomed over everything. Covering the ground in shadow and the garden out front only made the place creepier. I'd be glad enough to be out of here when I was done looking around. I was determined not to cut the search short, though. It was important I covered every corner to find something John missed. It definitely wasn't going to be easy. Sure enough, as John had said, the front door swung straight open. First thing I saw was a smashed vase on the ground. Looked to be pretty fine china. It must have been expensive. The whole vase was in pieces, scattered all around. It probably broke during the event. Mayer stumbled into it when he died, or the assailant knocked it over. I stepped carefully over it and moved further into the house. Going room to room though, I couldn't see nothing. Everything was untouched, like it hadn't been used in decades. I wondered how many of these rooms the mayor had ever actually used. From what I heard around town, it seems he'd had no wife or kids living here when he died. It perplexed me thinking of rattling around in this giant empty house all alone. Then again, I never liked fancy large places. They made me a little uneasy. Probably a result of never having been near one growing up, and as an adult, I was always on bounty hunter business. Felt like something or someone could jump at you from anywhere. Five Nights at Freddy's. I searched the whole estate top to bottom, but couldn't find a single thing out of place aside from the broken vase. I believed the sheriff when he said he hadn't touched anything. It didn't look like most of the rooms had even been occupied. There was just the one parlor off the front hallway that had a half-finished bottle of whiskey on the table to prove someone to actually live there. Here. Leaning against the wall of that room, I ran my hand through my hair. There must be something I hadn't seen. It's kind of dark. By now, it was getting pretty dark, yeah. So I went over to the desk and took up the small lantern that rested on the corner. I lit it carefully with a match from my pocket, and that was when I saw it. On the wall beside the door, there was a speck of blood. It was dried, but very dark. Must have been from the night it happened. So this is the room he was killed in. I looked around, considering the half-empty bottle and beside it, a pocket watch. What was I missing? Somewhere in this room, there had to be a clue. I started slowly, from the spot of blood on the sconce to the wall and floor around it. There was more dried blood. It looked as if someone had tried to clean it up pretty hastily, but missed some. I wonder what kind of murderer would try to clean up the blood but leave a broken vase on the floor. It didn't make no sense. Nothing's adding up. Moving from the wall to the floor, I found a streak of blood that soaked down between the floorboards. I followed it all the way to the back wall, where the parlor opened into the hallway, and there I found something even more unusual. Peering closer at the blood on the floor, I could see it was mixed in with something else. Some yellow, brownish, dried liquid. Could that be vomit? Dalton throwing up before he died? Don't tell me Jed killed him in this route. That's crazy. That's crazy. What do you mean? Or maybe. Suddenly, I had a flashback in my mind's eye, back to Dead Man's Rest a couple days ago when I fetched him up for Jed. Jed, who'd thrown up all over the back of the bar, who'd begged me not to tell anyone he was sick. Jed, who'd been a good friend of the mayor, who'd seen him the night he died. Jed? It couldn't be. But it was a start. Maybe if he'd been here, or he'd gotten more information about what Dalton said to him that night. I had to get back to the saloon right away. Blowing out the lantern and hurriedly putting it back, I headed out of the creepy residence and took the normality of the town center. And towards the normality of the town center. Careful to lock the gate behind me, of course. Of course. Nah, maybe he just came in and saw the blood and then the body and then threw up and then was like, oh god, I need to clean that up, and then cleaned it up. My mind was reeling from what I'd found, and until I spoke to Jed, I didn't want to jump to any conclusions. But it was incredible to think I might have found a lead for John. John, Jed, Jimmy. Jimmy, John, Jed. I burst into the saloon and looked around to find out where Jed was. Strangely, I didn't see him anywhere. There was someone I didn't recognize behind the bar. It's the dude, I forget his name. It was an older man who reeked of alcohol. I wondered if he was supposed to be back there. Excuse me, do you know where Jed is? Sorry, he said he's feeling a little under the weather tonight. Asked me to man the bar. I'm Devin. Devin! Can I get you anything? Though I don't know where aught is except the whiskey, so it's that or nothing. No thanks. I just needed to talk to Jed real bad. The old guy seemed to catch on that I was rushing. Well, he's be upstairs in his room, I'd imagine, but I don't expect him to answer the door. You're welcome to try, though. Thank you. I'll be back down when I'm done. Sure. He appeared to have already lost interest in me, instead scrutinizing the bottle of liquor in his hands. Now, where's that fancy doohickey what opens the bottle without using your teeth? Jed specifically told me, no teeth. Look at him trying to do his job. I left him to it and bolted up the stairs, finding my way to Jed's room without much trouble. Jed, you in there? I banged on the door loud enough that I knew he'd be able to hear even if he'd been sleeping. It's Lee McCarthy here. I gotta talk to you right now. Lee McCarthy? Jed's voice sounded weak as anything. I felt bad disturbing him for a moment, but the thrill of finally finding some lead that might not run cold had overtaken it. Yeah, I'm working for the sheriff, remember? Look, you gotta let me in. I'm here on urgent business. Sure, sorry, just a second. I heard some shuffling about inside and guessed he was getting out of bed and putting clothes on. Before long, the door clicked and swung open to show a gaunt, tired-looking Jed. His frame was looking thinner than I'd noticed before, and his face was pale and sunken. He must have really got something bad. I stepped in the room and he closed the door, sitting down on the bed and watching me with as much attention as he could muster. Look, I'm gonna make this short. I came here tonight because I've been looking around the old Dalton house, investigating what's going on. At the crime scene, I saw that in amongst Dalton's blood was some vomit. Jed was sitting very still. I observed him as I carried on. Now, I remember you were ill the other day, and I wanted to come back and check with you again, because I know you spoke to him the night he died. You two were friends, right? Yeah, we were. I knelt down and looked him square in the eyes. I gotta ask you now, Jed. Were you there when it happened? I don't want to believe any ill of you, but I gotta know if you know anything that can help me. Jed's gaze wavered, and he looked down at the floor. Bingo. There was something he hadn't told me before. I waited for what was going to come out of his mouth, bracing myself to hear the answer. Don't vomit on me. Ugh, the Jed crying CG again. It's a good CG. Jed buried his head in his hands, his shaky voice barely able to get the words out, and I saw tears dripping through his fingers. It was me. It was me, Lee. I did it. What? Jed? It couldn't be. I was hearing the words from the man himself, but I couldn't reconcile the cheery, smiling barkeep I knew with the image in my head of a brutal murderer. Maybe it was because Jed reminded me so much of Jimmy, but I couldn't put them together. He had to be covering for someone, or something. What's he got on you, Jed? I know it couldn't have been you. Tell me what the real killer's got on you and we'll fix it. We'll make sure he can't hurt you. He took his hands away from his face and I could see the streaks of tears on his ashen cheeks. It was me. It was all me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Jed was shaking now, tears streaming down onto the floor as he sat hunched over, hugging himself. He looked like he was about to throw up again any second. What happened? I sat down shakily, still unable to believe that this man could be capable of such a crime. Jed hiccuped, his sobs getting in the way of his words, which tumbled out in hasty bundles, as if they couldn't wait to leave his weary soul. He forgot his pocket watch. He left it at the saloon, and we'd been talking all night, and he'd been drinking, and I saw he'd forgot it. When I closed up, I went to go get and give it back to him. I went across town to his house. But when I got there, he'd left the gate and the front door open. I just let myself in, not thinking it'd be a problem, but he'd been drinking even more after he got home. He was so whittled he didn't even recognize me. I tried to tell him I'd come to give him back his watch, but he didn't even seem to see me. He was brandishing a gun around, yelling about Hollis and Nancy. Nancy's his ex-wife, you see. And I think he thought I was Hollis or something. Next thing I know, he's coming at me. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. I grabbed a vase that was what was nearby and just hit him over the head with it. All I was thinking about was stopping him hurting me, Lee. I didn't know it'd kill him. He fell down unconscious and the gun landed on the floor and went off on accident. The bullet went straight into his side. I tried to help him. I grabbed some cloth and I cleaned it up all around him, tried to stem the bleeding. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do or who to call. He wouldn't wake up, no matter what I did, Lee. He wouldn't wake up. Jed was hysterical now, the sobs coming back in full force, rocking back and forth as he confessed. It seemed like the guilt of holding onto all this had been killing him. I didn't mean it to happen. Not any of it. He wouldn't wake up and I panicked, Lee. I've got a condition, an illness, which makes it hard sometimes. I get sick, and I see things that aren't really there. I felt the illness coming on, and I knew I had to get back to the saloon because otherwise I wouldn't make it back. I stayed as long as I could, trying to make him wake up, trying to get the bleeding to stop, but I couldn't do nothing. After I was sick the first time, I couldn't stay any longer. I just ran away, Lee. I just ran. I left him there to die. His shoulders heaved and his head dropped firmly back into his hands as he wailed. Awkwardly, I reached out a hand and touched him on the shoulder. I didn't know what to say. That freaking sucks, man. Poor Jed. According to the law, Jed would be held responsible because he was the last one to see the mayor alive, and he didn't find help. Not only that, but he kept quiet about it after the fact. No matter what else was true about the story, and I believed all of it was, the facts were clear, and the law would lay the blame on Jed. But looking at him, at how sick he was, how scared he was, a man like him didn't deserve to die for an accident, for a mistake. And even if the sheriff could downgrade the sentence from a hanging, a jail cell would kill Jed in his condition just as surely as a noose. I sighed and took my hat off, running my free hand through my hair. What was I gonna do? What's gonna happen to me, Lee? Jed's piercing blue eyes were terrified as he stared at me, tears still freely leaking from them. Please, I'm so afraid. I don't know what's gonna happen to me. Hey, look, Jed. I'm gonna make this alright. I made up my mind. This man weren't a danger to anyone, and I couldn't sentence him to death. This was one of those times where law and morality didn't meet eye to eye, and I knew in my heart what the right thing to do was. What do you mean? I ain't gonna let them hang you, Jed. Look at you. This was obviously an accident, and though you should have said something before now, we're gonna make sure that the sheriff knows it. You can't tell the sheriff. Jed looked panic-stricken at the thought, and he suddenly yelled out. Cartwright does everything by the book. I'll be at the gallows by morning. It's why I couldn't come forward before. Please, Lee, you can't tell him. I looked down at the floor. Of course, from Jed's perspective, it seemed that John would immediately slam the book on him. A few days ago, I'd have thought the same myself. But the talk I'd had with him not a few hours ago, the way he'd been this morning, I wasn't sure if it was enough to overturn a lifetime of doing everything by the book, but I wanted to believe in John. I wanted to trust that he'd be able to do what was right. A man's life was at stake here, and Jed wasn't no threat to anyone. He'd been ready to call the case closed this morning, and the only reason we were in this situation now was because I couldn't let it go. But now that I'd found the truth, could I really share it with him and trust that he'd know what to do? I told him I believed that he was a good sheriff and a good man. When it came to it, though, I wasn't sure I wanted to put it to the test. That's a little rough. Jed was watching me tearfully, waiting for me to tell him I wouldn't say nothing to John. Look, I'll sort this out, alright? You stay in here, don't say nothing to anyone else, and I'm gonna make sure you don't get sent to the hangman. Don't tell him, Lee. Don't do it. He won't understand. He'll... Jed trailed off, tears welled up again, and closed his eyes. I stood up, my jaw set, and took my hand away from his quaking shoulder. Trust me, I'm gonna fix this. We're gonna fix it. Without another look or word to the stricken barkeep, I left the room and closed the door carefully behind me. Now, what the heck was I going to do? Leave town. Just kidding. My feet took me down the stairs and towards the sheriff's station, still having no idea what I was going to say to John. I told him I trusted him, but now Jed was putting his trust in me. I knew I could make this whole thing go away by lying to John and telling him I found nothing. If I did that, though, I'd be a hypocrite of the highest order, and I wouldn't be putting my faith in the sheriff's ability to do right. But if I told him, and he decided he had to send Jed down, I couldn't live with the guilt of knowing I sent a man like that to his death when I could have stopped it. All too soon, I was standing at the door of his office, and it was time to make up my mind. Okay, this Lee McCarthy is a good egg, a good honest egg, because we went to ask John for permission to leave, so we're gonna trust John with the truth. This is a different John from the one in Jed's playthrough, so... I took a breath and opened the door. John was sitting in his office, scribbling away on some papers, and looked up with a grin when I came in. So? Did you find anything? Still not quite sure how to word it, I sat down opposite him and let my expression speak for me. John's smile faded away as he grasped that I had indeed found something. Not quite sure where to start, really. Look, John, this isn't a straightforward case. Tell me about it. I've had some like that before. Just spit it out. Whatever it is, we can handle it. His words put some of the courage back in my chest. He'd do the right thing. I knew he would. It was Jed, Sheriff. Jed's our killer. The sheriff looked as shocked as I must have when I heard the news. Jed? No, it can't be. He and Dalton were friends. It was all entirely an accident. I've heard Jed's account of the whole thing. You see, John, Jed's sick. He's not doing so well, and I'm concerned. He's afraid, and he don't know what's gonna happen to him. We did not do a really good job at explaining this situation to him. We're gonna let a man go because he's sick? It was an accident? I'm sick, it was an accident? John sat back in his chair, letting out a low breath. I've gotta go and talk to him. Look, John, you need to understand something before you do. Jed begged me not to tell you. What? He didn't think you'd understand, and he asked me to keep it quiet. No, I couldn't very well do that, but you gotta try to be understanding with him, because he won't be happy to see you when you arrive. John's face was grave. Jed asked you to lie to me? I wonder if I should have said anything, but it wouldn't do to send the sheriff in there to a hysterical Jed with no warning. Yeah, he's scared, John. He's real scared, and he didn't mean for any of this. He knows that you do things a certain way, and he's afraid, and he's not thinking straight. The sheriff nodded slowly, taking it in. Then he abruptly stood up and came round the desk. Thank you, Lee. I'll be back shortly, when I've had a statement from Jed himself. Meantime, would you mind waiting here? Not at all. Good luck, John. John nodded, took his hat and departed the office. I was left alone to sit there, looking over the case papers he'd left on the desk and worrying about what I'd done. I'd had the choice to let Jed go free, and I chose to trust John. He confessed to me and begged me not to say anything. Did I really make the right choice? Could I know what kind of man John Cartwright was after such a short time? Dang, if this wasn't making me nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. To be extremely nervous, the cat does not want its long tail to be run over by the rocking chair. Aww. I took to pacing about the office, not a thought in my mind except what was happening at the saloon right this second. Would the sheriff really send a man like Jed to his death? I'd promised he wouldn't, but I was slowly realizing I hadn't been in a position to say what the sheriff might or might not do. After what felt like an agonizing long time, I heard footsteps coming up to the office door. John came back in, and the grim look on his face sent my stomach down about 8 stories. What happened? He shook his head, taking off his hat and putting it down slowly on the rack. I'm sorry, Lee, but the way Jed tells it, he's absolutely responsible. He didn't run to get help or nothing at the time, and he kept quiet for days after. The way the feds will see it, he's guilty. He ran a tired hand over his face. I can't do nothing for him. Yes, you can. You know you can, John. The sheriff looked up at me with narrow eyes. What are you implying? The feds? Tell the feds it was Bill. They'll call it case closed, just like you were about to this morning. But that ain't what happened. What does it matter what happened? You know as well as I do that Jed doesn't deserve to be hung for this. If you can stop that from happening, then stop it. It ain't right. John stood and slammed his hands on the table in frustration. Dang it, Lee, don't you see I have to do my job? If I start lying to the federal government, what kind of a sheriff does that make me? I thought we had this discussion. I thought you understood. And I thought you understood too, Sheriff. I could have walked away with this information and you'd have been none the wiser. But I didn't. I betrayed Jed's trust and I came to you because I believed in you. I thought you'd do the right thing. So what? You're putting me in a position where I have to lie to my superiors to save Jed? And on top of that, you're trying to guilt me into making that decision because of your choice to put it on me? Sorry, Lee, but that won't work. You made this choice, and now you're gonna have to live with the decision I make. Oof. Oof. Big oof. I sat down and put my face in my hands. How could this have all gone so horribly wrong? I wish I'd never come back here after going to see Jed. Heck, I wish I'd left this morning before getting my nose stuck in this whole business. I told you because I believed in you, John. You're right that I'll have to live with my decision, but you will too. Don't you forget that in your rush to please the feds. God dang, you still don't understand, do you? I have a responsibility to the people and to the law, and I can't just forget that when it suits me. He turned away from me and looked out the window, and the silence that stretched out between us felt like it'd never end. Long gone was the comfortable talk and quiet laughter of earlier. The atmosphere was ice cold. I'll plead his case to the government. I'll try to get them to downgrade his sentence to life imprisonment based on circumstances. But I can't do no more than that for him, Lee, not without compromising my integrity. I shook my head. Coming to John had been wrong. You know as well as I do that putting a man that sick in prison is a death sentence, John. He won't last 3 months. The sheriff didn't reply or even turn around to look at me. I knew this was a tough decision for him to make, but at the same time, I was disappointed and angry. After what happened the night before, I thought he'd changed. I thought he'd realized what was really important. It's been 3 days, 4 days with John. Turned out I was dead wrong, and poor Jed would be the one to pay the price. Also, don't forget that the mayor, like, died. Like, he's dead. I felt sick. Without another word, I kicked back my chair and stormed out of the office. Poor Jed, bro. I couldn't look at John because he only reminded me of the decision I'd made, to put my trust in the wrong person. Blinded by the way I'd felt about him, I couldn't see that underneath he was the same as ever. I packed up my belongings and walked out. On the way past the office door, I took one last glance at John. He was standing where I'd left him, still looking out the window, hands folded behind his back. I couldn't see his face, and I didn't want to. There was nothing more to be said. He'd made his decision, and I'd made mine. I left the station and headed toward the edge of town. Dead Man's Rest caught my eye as I passed it, and I remembered Jed's crying, terrified face. That face would probably haunt me, just like Jimmy's did, for the rest of my days. I turned my back to the station and walked out into the desert, leaving Golders Rock and its sheriff far behind me. That was probably the worst ending out of all the endings and all the routes I've played so far. Jesus Christ. Jed, no! He trusted us and we just betrayed him like that. That's terrible. Oops. Alright, let's go back and see what the other options, where the other options lead us. Why don't we? Thanks for playing, you're welcome. We're gonna play again. That's crazy. Load. The last decision. Keep it quiet. You don't need to know. I took a breath and opened the door, schooling my face into an expression of disappointment. John looked up from his office as I entered, but his bright smile faded upon seeing my face. You got nothing, huh? I can tell just by that look. Yeah, sorry, John, but you were right. Nothing there to be found. Good news is, you've done a very thorough job on your first sweep. John stared down at the desk. I hated lying to him. It felt like a knife in my chest. Too late. I doubted whether this had been the right decision after all. Dang, I really thought you'd be able to find something. Stupid of me, really. I know I searched that place thoroughly. Then he looked back up at me and tried to smile. Well, nothing to be done, I guess. I'll send a telegram to the feds in the morning telling them it was McCoy's lot and that they've already paid the price. Then I'll schedule the mayoral election for next month and start getting this town back on track. He hesitated and I wasn't sure what to say or do. I felt so guilty I couldn't stand it. I guess there's no more reason for you to stay here, Lee. His voice sounded like a kicked puppy, and I couldn't even bring myself to respond in the positive. He makes one friend and he immediately pushes his one friend away. He deserved better than me, than this, what I'd done. We were supposed to be friends, and I told him I trusted him. I couldn't stay around here any longer, seeing him every day and knowing the truth. Yeah, case closed and all that. I suppose I'm free to go now. His expression was another stab in my chest, but I couldn't do nothing about it. Staying would be worse for both of us. I could tell he felt betrayed. I was probably his first proper friend in a long time. He wanted me to stay. I knew it. No matter how cheery he'd been this morning, he really didn't want to be left alone again. But what else could I do? Be the deputy? Thank you, Sheriff, for everything. I'll be sure to come back and visit town one day. I'd like that. When you do, let me buy you a drink. You know, to say thanks for all your help with this. Listen, Lee. I know I gave you a hard time at the beginning, and I'm sorry for that. I've been working alone for a very long time, and it's hard, you know? Adjusting to having someone else working with you, especially someone you don't know well. I'm sorry if I made you feel like you can't. Like you aren't welcome. His nervous expression and shifting manner broke my heart. It ain't like that, John. I appreciate everything you've done for me, and your understanding about the whole thing with Bill, shooting him when I ought not to. It's just time to move on. That's all. I've always been a drifter, staying in one place ain't a good look on me. John nodded and forced a smile. That don't look very smiley to me. Well, alright then. Good luck out there, McCarthy. I shook his outstretched hand, thinking of all the things I should have said to him. Thanks. I'll see you. Without another word, I turned on my heel and left the room, picking up my plunder from the place I'd been sleeping and leaving the station quickly. I walked out towards the edge of town, kicking rocks as I went. I'll never know if John would have done the right thing. I never gave him the chance. Well, we did. At least I thought to myself as I looked up at Dead Man's Rest, stars beginning to peek out from behind. At least I knew that no matter what, Jed would go free. With that one comforting thought to console my aching heart, I headed out of Golders Rock for the last time. The end. Not even the credits. Oh wait. No, the credits come after. Okay, now go back to the choice where we can leave the morning of. Sheriff got multiple endings? Like more than 2? Let me not overstay my welcome. Apparently that was not the best ending possible. Load. Well, thank you very much for everything, John, and farewell. I'll be on my way. John seemed sad to see me go, but he didn't try to stop me. I wasn't sure it was the right decision, but something in my gut told me it was time to go. As much as I liked the sheriff, I was sure he wasn't ever gonna like me back. He just weren't that kind of man. And the longer I stayed around, the more I'd end up falling for him. So the safest thing to do was to pack up and leave like I'd intended to from day one. I'd got my bounty and I'd done what I came here to do. Whatever mystery lay behind this murder would have to remain unsolved. None of my business. Perhaps I'll see you again? I tried to not let the hopeful note in his voice stick too much in my chest. Yeah, I'll stop by for a drink sometime. I'd like that. The sheriff's sad smile saw me out the door, and my feet carried me away from him, into my room to pick up my plunder. Then out of the station and back the way I came. Well, that's a pretty gradient. This was for the best, I told myself. It had to be. I took a deep breath and faced the sun, falling in the afternoon sky. It was time to get out of Golders Rock for good. I love this gradient. Time for my next adventure. Oh, this is the best ending. Yeah. For his route. Meow. No, it's not. This is just part of the CG. Wait, because in the other endings, it would be a zoom in of like the bigger CG. So this is not the best ending. I don't think. but it works for me. Also, I'm obsessed with this gradient. It looks so good. Okay, skip. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. Yerp. Thanks for playing, you're welcome. We're still gonna go. We're continuing. Load. What was the decision before that? Oh, that was the same one. Load. What's this? Do you really think that something like that is worth a man's life? Yeah, whatever artist does these CGs does a really good job on the hair. I am a big fan. Cartwright sighed again and looked away, shaking his head. No, I don't. Oh, where's the line drawn? Yeah, we heard that. Okay, I think we have to... Let me... Okay, if we skip, it'll be the same options. Oh, wait. Oh, that gave us a different option. Thanks, I'm glad to know you, John. Okay. Did we get enough affection points with him with that decision? And of course, you could call me Lee. His smile widened. Then, I'll see you later, Lee. I like the sound of my name coming off his lips. With a final nod, I left the office and closed the door behind me. I was very glad to have had that conversation, getting some insight into what John was thinking. Wait, hold on. Log. Friends. Okay. Oh, this is just after us sleeping, so this is not the morning where we make the choice. I don't think. I was very glad to have had that conversation, getting some insight into what John was thinking, and I had to be honest, I was relieved that he still felt like he could be friends with me, knowing who I really am. That meant a lot more than I think he realized. Especially given how I was starting to feel about him. It seemed like he'd been so nervous about being friends, though, that I'd have to hide that at all costs. He wouldn't react very well, that was for sure. Okay, is this the same? Skip? Okay, this is the same, so we're gonna load. We're gonna load. Should I load from the beginning? No, let me just go back from the... sorry, I got a bit carried away, but you can't deny that that guy deserved it. Cartwright sighed and put his hand over his face. That's not the point, McCarthy. You knew he was trying to provoke us. But thank you for your apology. I didn't know what else to say, so I let it fall into an uneasy silence. And then we skip a Rooney. Let's see if any of the other choices are the same. Let me choose the second one. Skip. Okay, that's the same. Alright, so if we go back. Load. We did that, so I'll go here. Load save, yes. It ain't too late. Let me help you get him back. He started again, sinking deeper into his palms. It was almost a little frightening, seeing such a powerful and determined man looking so vulnerable. Shoot. Never thought I'd see the day when I'd have to rely on some other guy to do my job right. Everyone needs help sometimes, Sheriff. I still didn't let go of his shoulder. His mustache twitched. I think he was trying to hide a smile. And to top it off, it's you, the guy who's utter garbage at his job. I snorted. whether I'm trash at my job or not ain't something you know about, seeing as I'm a bounty hunter. Not right now, you ain't, McCarthy. Okay. Determination. Determination. Oh yeah. Come on, Bill. McCoy. He said, shoot me! Kill me already! Do it, I dare you! Do it, I dare you! Blah, 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 blah. I don't know which one's better of these two. Me... Because there's gotta be a good ending with a CG, right? Let's go with the first one first. Skip-a-rooney. Okay, I think his good end will be probably we have to go through all the things and then we have to tell him about Jed, and then he will change his mind about Jed. I think that will be the way to get his good ending. Poor Jed, bro. Oh wait, that won't work because that's the same. That was highlighted. That was the same option. Okay, let's load. Maybe we can load from the beginning. No, it's not load from the beginning. Let's go load save. At least I'm out there trying to give a dang to help you. Yeah, we gotta speak to him respectfully. Disrespectfully, but respectfully. He sat back, eyes narrowed, appraising me. Only because it suits you though, right, McCarthy? You don't give two poops about justice or anything else. You're a bounty hunter out for your own back, so don't go acting like you're trying to help for any noble reasons. I wanted to argue with him, but I couldn't. It was true. Only reason I stuck around for this was because he wouldn't let me go get Bill. Then the sheriff sighed and dropped back down in his chair. Okay. Skip. Let's save. Let's save it here. We'll write this one. I don't know which one's better. I'm no traitor. It ain't too late. Oh, it ain't too late. Skip. He gets shot. He taunts us. We're going. He's taunting us again. He's baiting us, and then we shoot him. Bam. Okay. Sorry, I got a bit carried away. Tee. Just a little oopsie. Tee. You're a good man, I think. I'm just gonna go with it. Skip. Thanks, I'm glad to know you. Skip. We're in this together. We're all in this together. Okay. And we go Jed, and he's crying and confessing and confessing and crying and throwing up and crying and confessing and throwing up, and we... I think this is the final one. Okay, let's load. Let us load. What is this? We did that one. What is this one? It's straight to the hideout. No, it's not this one. No, do not overwrite the save. Crazy. Load the save. Okay. What was this? Log. It'll take as long as it takes, McCarthy. If it's a job you want, you will find plenty of work. That should keep you... So we found out who did this. We said thank you for your time? It's clear I wanted to get my way. Seems sorry for it, but that didn't make it any better. Put my hat back on and tipped it to Cartwright. At least I was in his good books. Oh, this is like us choosing if we want to go on his route or not. Then what happens after? We're on Jed's route? Yeah. Load! Load, 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 load. Load. Okay, remember what I said. Yes, help me. Okay, now we just gotta do the opposite things of what we chose last time. I think. Oh wait, oh I forgot about this one. Did I not save at this junction? No I did, I just missed it. Okay, let's save again. Ain't no way Cartwright would do anything like that. Psh, buddy, come on. Haas looked grim. It's nice you got faith in him, McCarthy. John and I go way back, and I know he takes his job real serious. He's also a very passionate man. Yeah, you said that. You said, oh I can't skip it, because it's new dialogue. I ain't saying he did it himself, but he could easily be somewhere on the sidelines is all. It couldn't be right. Sure, Cartwright seemed a little shifty, but would he really go that far? In another timeline, he sure did. Alright, skip. That was the last one I needed. Okay, let me save again. Yeah, I really... At least I'm trying to help you. I'm no traitor, you know that. Skip. I. Shoot me right now! Shoot me! Says Wild Bill McCoy. Sorry. I got a bit carried away. Hee tee. I shot him dead. Tee. My bad. Hee. This one I still don't know which one's the better option. You're a good man. Skip. There's gotta be a good ending. At least I'm glad to know you, John. Skip. We're in this together. Skip. Ugh. Trust him with the truth? Ooh. Oh, John walked back in with a grim expression and sunk down into his chair without another word. I sighed deep, walking around to his side of the desk to stand by the window. So, John watched me, and I could tell he was struggling heavily with this. It seemed that he'd been just as affected by Jed as I had. I don't know what to do, Lee. I ain't been right in the head lately. Everything's getting all muddled up between what's right and wrong. After last night, I thought I had it figured out. I thought I knew what kind of sheriff I wanted to be, but now, when I'm faced with this decision, what can I do? His eyes turned slowly to desperation as he spoke, his voice quavering. The only thing you can do is what your heart tells you is right. At the end of the day, all a man's got is his conscience. Put aside the fact that you're a sheriff just for now, and think about what John Cartwright would do. Being a sheriff is all I've ever known, Lee. It's too hard to just forget that. It shaped my whole life, my ideology, my sense of morality. No, it hasn't. You were John Cartwright before you got this post, once upon a time. And that man's the one I spoke to last night, who said he wouldn't prosecute me even when I admitted to sodomy in front of him. John looked down at the floor, still troubled. That was differently. This is a whole other crime, a whole other set of circumstances, and a man's died. I considered that for a minute. It's true, but you know that Jed didn't do it on purpose. He's no more of a killer than you are, less so even. I know. He rubbed his face with both his hands, groaning. What if I talk to the feds and get him to downgrade his sentence? You and I both know that if Jed goes to jail, he's as good as dead. You saw him in there. He wouldn't last 3 months. Yeah, you're right. Of course you're right. He was agonizing over it, trying to find another way out, but I could tell he was slowly making up his mind. I'd been right to put my faith in him. He wasn't going to throw Jed to the wolves. Eventually, he seemed to come to a decision and gazed up at me with a new fire in his eyes. Alright, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send a telegram to the federal office and tell them that McCoy's gang were responsible for the whole thing. Jed don't need to be implicated in this. Then only you, Jed, and I will ever know the truth about what happened. The feds get their man for their records, and Jed gets to live out the rest of his days in the saloon, for however long he has left. I beamed. I couldn't help myself. The smile crept across my face without me even realizing. Heartened by my obvious approval, John grinned back at me, wiping his forehead with his wrist. Right, the decision's been made. Hand me that telegraph. Right away, boss. Call him boss now, okay? He typed out the whole message and sent it off in less than half an hour. When it was done, he sat back and pushed the machine away, wiping his head and staring at the ceiling. Done. It's done. As far as the feds will ever know, Jed had nothing to do with it. I pulled the other chair around the desk so I could sit closer to him. You did a good thing today, John. Did I? Never in my whole career have I ever considered lying to an official before. And now I've done it over a goddamn murder case. It was probably the most impactful lie I could have ever told. What does that make me, Lee? Someone who lies to his superiors? Who covers up the truth? Who's supposed to set a shining example but instead betrays the trust of the government? It makes you a good man, John. He let out a long breath. I'm not so sure. Listen. Earlier on, when Jed begged me not to tell you the truth, I still came to you. I could have walked away, and you'd have never known any different. You would have called the case over to the federal government with the same result. But I chose to come to you and tell you against Jed's wishes because I knew you'd make the right choice. I believed in your integrity. Not as a sheriff, because we all know you have that in spades, but as a man. And look, you came through for me. You came through for Jed. Putting a man like him in jail could never truly be justice. John was watching me with rapt attention throughout the whole speech, his eyes glistening. I noticed for the first time that we were sitting very close, so much so I could smell his cologne, a woody scent I found very distracting. Alright, McCarthy, relax. You know, Lee, since I was a boy, I've always been treated different. Oh my god. John backstory. I guess I was always too serious for the others. Never could get involved in playground games or other such nonsense. I was a loner, always watching from the sidelines. When I moved to Golders Rock and got elected sheriff, I was overwhelmed because it meant people put their trust in me. But I quickly realized that it wasn't a popularity contest. They'd voted for me only because of the very solitude I so disliked. Because I could arbitrate from a distance. Sure, I have plenty of acquaintances, and every time I go to the saloon, people are all over me buying me drinks. But it ain't friendship, it's just respect. They look up to me as some sort of figurehead of the law, as if I can't be nothing else. He paused, looking distraught. I was desperate to reach out to him, but I wasn't sure if it would be the wrong move. The last thing I wanted to do was upset him right now. He needed a friend, someone he could trust in. His eyes locked on mine, soft and warm. When I walked in that room today, Jed was terrified of me. He recoiled, and then he held out his arms for me to cuff him. Sure, I was going to drag him off to the cells. They all think I haven't an ounce of empathy. I guess because I've never really had a reason to show them any different. But nobody cares to know me enough to find out. I'm a human being! Except you, Lee. You're the first one that's treated me like a man, and not just like a sheriff. You could have walked away, but you gave me a chance to be a better person. I was leaning forward, closing the distance between us. This weren't a normal distance for two men to be talking, that was for sure. But I didn't know what he wanted. Did he mean to be this intimate? My brain was all in a whirl. We're his first and only friend, so he has no idea. Oh my god! All of a sudden, my body seemed to move on its own. I found myself standing. My chair pushed to the side, and then my back against the wall. Oh my god! Oh! 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 I couldn't even process what was about to happen before it already was. Ah! He's bold! Oh, John, you're bold! John's lips covered mine swiftly, fervently, like a man dying for air. Just friendship things, you know? His touch was searing, his hard body pressed against mine. I felt his tongue on my lips and gladly entwined it with my own. His woody scent surrounded me, disorienting me, intoxicating me. I kissed him back heartily with full force, eager to show him how I felt. Soon enough, though, he pulled back and jumped away from me as if I was on fire. God dang, sorry. He turned away and paced over to the other side of the room. I didn't mean to. Oh my god, his feelings of friendship just came overwhelming, bubbled up. He had to do something. What you must think of me. Luckily, I'm so sorry. I have to arrest myself now. I've never been this close to someone before, and you're all I can think about. Oh my god. Oh my god. I just had to know. I had to know what it felt like. Oh my god, bro is so... He's more backed up than McCarthy is right now. Shoot. He sat down, defeated, as if all the energy had left his body in a rush. My mind still hadn't quite caught up yet. It was stuck somewhere back about 30 seconds ago. What I did process, though, was that he wanted me. In some way, somehow, this man wanted me. We're his first and only friend. Well, we're the first and only person who's treated him like a person. No wonder why he has feelings. And god dang, but I wanted him too. If there was a chance for us, I wasn't about to let that go without a fight. I walked over to where he was sitting and crouched down before him. And what did it feel like? He met my gaze with fervor. Indescribable. I ain't gonna lie to you, John. No point hiding it anymore. I'm real sweet on you. But I don't want to do this if it ain't what you want, you know? So you gotta tell me where you're at. Respect. Respectfully. Respect. His next words were very soft, and his warm brown eyes never left mine. Dang it. Ever since you arrived, Lee, my head's been all topsy-turvy. Yeah, like 4 days ago. It's so hard to explain, but you make everything different in a way I never knew it could be. I've always been a responsible sheriff, a good Christian, and an honest man, and today I'm none of those. But even so, I've never been this close to anyone before. It's incredible, and as crazy as it is, I don't ever want to go back to being right side up. I felt a rush of adrenaline and my heart started pounding tenfold. John's smile was infectious. Does that mean you'll be mine? He nodded, and I could feel his nerves, but the explosion of happiness in my chest far outweighed my own anxiety. Okay, Smoochie. I'm gonna say I can't believe he made the first move on us, but what other like way? Like it would not have gone well if we made the first move on him. I leaned in and he came forward to meet me halfway. The chemistry between us, undeniable. His lips were demanding. I could feel his mustache tickling my face. I could definitely get used to this. Okay. Okay. He's the one who puts the moves first. We stood, and he pushed me back against the wall once again, still connected, insatiable. His hands were in my hair, tugging roughly, while mine were roamed over every inch of his body. I could feel his excitement, and my own, growing rapidly. When he broke apart for a breath, I grinned. So is the good Sheriff John Cartwright willing to become a criminal? Right here on his office floor? Not the office floor. Come on. It was supposed to be a joke, to lighten the mood a little out of the hot and heavy place it got into. But the sheriff knocked me galley west when he grinned right back at me. You betcha, bro. He attacked me again, his tongue sliding into my mouth, and I could feel his grin against my lips. The next day, we heard back from the feds thanking us for taking care of Bill, and I let Jed know he was off the hook. Is this the only route where we've done anything past kissing? I feel like that is the fact. He broke down crying, not believing John didn't turn him in, and it took a few minutes for him to recover the ability to speak. It took a few minutes for him to recover, and when he finally did, I told him I wanted him to use Bill's bounty to go see a doctor. He was in real bad shape, and I felt there was more to his story than he was telling. Something that made me feel a kind of kinship. His gaydar. It took a lot of persuading, but I wouldn't take no for an answer. I liked Jed and his sunny disposition, and I sure wanted him to stick around longer. After making sure Jed would be alright, I went back to the station. Since I'd be sticking around town some more, John got me set up to help him with his sheriff duties. Deputy? Nothing as exciting as Dalton's case occurred again. During the day, we'd make the rounds, resolving minor conflicts and catching the occasional thieves and bandits, keeping the town in order, all according to the Hoyle. In the evenings, though, the strict, law-abiding facade fell. We'd hold lengthy conversations, and I'd show John how to enjoy the finer things in life, without all the rules and regulations. As it should be. Though I was tied down to a town for the time being. ... I hadn't ever been a freer man. Period. Period! The end. Oh, is there no full CG for that nice gradient? We did it! Yay! Okay, there was more to the sheriff's story than I thought there would be. And kind of glad that despite what the truth was in Jed's route, it's a different reality in the sheriff's route, so keeping it different. And I like that McCarthy was respectful and didn't want to freak out the sheriff, even though he liked him. And the sheriff, being so deprived and hungry, ended up making the first move. Awesome and epic and awesome. And I kind of get why things occurred in like 4 days span, because they don't have that much time in these old days. You don't know when someone's gonna contract cholera and die. They don't have the internet back then. It's only like whoever's in town. So of course they would develop feelings fast. Like, You gonna let them slip away? Nah. Thanks for playing, you're welcome. Thanks for making the game. Alright, we have one more route after this. And it is the route I'm most excited for, actually. It'll be, Wow, Bill McCoy! Alright, so we'll do that sometime in the future. Next week will be the first day of July, and the first day of July means it's the first day of art fight. So I think I'm gonna be, for July's streams, I'll probably be drawing for art fight. I don't have a team yet. I usually let the website decide on my team for me. My government assigned team. But I know they opened up team registration early, and I know I can let the team decide for me early, but I wanted to wait. Actually, I might have the team sort me today so that I have time to draw the little graphic and post on Twitter, and also to collect some reps before before the first, because the site is probably going to be laggy and go down like it does every year. So look forward to that if anyone's interested in that. My username on Artfight is the same as here, and my Twitter, Lopertinger. So find me there, and we'll fight. We'll fight the good art fight. Alright, thanks so much for watching, for lurking, hanging out, all that good stuff. I'll see y'all next week. Goodbye!